The night Vanessa Sinclair's billion-dollar empire nearly collapsed, she wasn't attacked by hackers or competitors. She was sitting in a cafe, mascara smudged, listening to a man in a $10,000 suit tell her that powerful women like her would die alone. Everyone pretended not to hear. Everyone except the quiet cybersecurity analyst in the corner booth who saw something no one else did, a woman drowning in public while the world scrolled past. Adrian Hayes didn't know that walking over to ask if she was okay would cost him everything he'd built. He did it anyway. If you want to see how far a single moment of kindness can go, stay until the end. Hit like and drop a comment with your city so I can see where this story reaches. Adrian Hayes wasn't supposed to be at Riverside Brew that Thursday night. He'd promised his daughter, Mia, he'd pick her up early from his ex-wife's place. But Chloe had texted at the last second asking for an extra 2 hours. Something about a work emergency. Adrian suspected it was actually about her new boyfriend wanting more alone time, but he'd stopped arguing about things like that after the divorce was finalized. So there he was, laptop open on a wobbly cafe table, VPN connected, running security diagnostics on the company network while October rain hammered the windows. The cafe smelled like burnt espresso and wet wool. A folk singer in the corner was murdering a Fleetwood Mac cover. Adrian had his earbuds in, half listening to a cybersecurity podcast, half watching lines of code scroll across his screen. He noticed her because everyone noticed her. Vanessa Sinclair walked into Riverside Brew the way most people walked into airports, moving fast, eyes forward, radiating the kind of energy that said she had somewhere more important to be. She wore a charcoal trench coat that probably cost more than Adrian's monthly rent, and her dark hair was pulled into a tight bun that looked almost aggressive in its precision. No entourage. No assistant hovering with a tablet, just her, alone, scanning the room like she was mentally calculating the quickest exit route. Adrian had seen her exactly 3 times in person before tonight. Once at the company's annual meeting where she delivered a speech about innovation that made half the room want to work harder and the other half want to quit because they'd never measure up. Once in the executive elevator when he'd accidentally gotten on at the wrong floor and spent 18 silent seconds staring at the buttons while she typed on her phone. And once through the glass walls of a conference room where she'd been eviscerating someone's quarterly projections with the kind of calm brutality that made grown men sweat. She was 30 years old and worth more than some small countries. She'd inherited Sinclair Technologies from her father at 24 and had tripled its value in 6 years through a combination of ruthless acquisitions and genuine innovation. The business press called her the Ice Queen of Silicon Valley's Midwest expansion. Her own employees called her a genius, a tyrant, or both depending on the week. Adrian called her his boss's 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 boss, and he tried very hard not to think about her at all. She ordered something complicated involving oat milk and disappeared into the corner booth farthest from the windows. Adrian went back to his diagnostics. 3 minutes later, someone else walked in. The man was older, maybe 55, with silver hair and a navy suit that screamed old money. He spotted Vanessa immediately and walked straight to her table without ordering. Adrian wouldn't have paid attention, except the man's voice carried. "Vanessa, didn't expect to find you slumming it with the regular people." Adrian glanced up. Vanessa's expression hadn't changed, but something about her posture had gone rigid. "Richard, this is a surprise." "I'm sure it is." Richard sat down without being invited. "I wanted to talk before the investor meeting next week. We can schedule something through my assistant." This is off the record. Richard leaned back, draping one arm across the booth like he owned it. "I've been talking to some of the other board members. There's concern about your leadership style." "My leadership style has generated a 42% return over the last 3 years." "Your leadership style has also generated a reputation." Richard's smile was the kind that never reached his eyes. "You're brilliant, Vanessa. No one disputes that. But there's a reason you're 30 years old and still single. A reason you spend Thursday nights alone in coffee shops instead of building the kind of personal relationships that translate to long-term investor confidence." Adrian's hands had stopped typing. He wasn't trying to eavesdrop anymore. He was just listening, frozen, as the conversation took a turn into something ugly. "My personal life is not relevant to—" "Everything is relevant when you're the face of a billion-dollar company." Richard leaned forward. "You want the truth? The board thinks you're too cold, too calculating. Investors want someone they can trust, and trust comes from connection. You don't connect, Vanessa. You intimidate. You isolate. And frankly, powerful women like you who choose career over everything else? He shook his head slowly, almost sadly. They end up alone. That's not judgment. That's just reality. The cafe had gone quiet. Not actually quiet. The folk singer was still playing. The espresso machine was still hissing. But it felt quiet because everyone within earshot had heard what Richard said and was now pretending they hadn't. Adrian watched Vanessa's face. She didn't flinch, didn't blink. Her expression stayed perfectly neutral except for the smallest tightness around her eyes. Thank you for the feedback, Richard. I'll take it under consideration. I hope you do. Richard stood up, adjusted his cufflinks. Because the board meeting next week is going to be a bloodbath if you don't start showing them the human side they're looking for. Think about what I said. He walked out. The door chimed. The rain kept falling. Vanessa sat completely still in the booth, staring at her untouched coffee. Her hands were folded on the table, and Adrian could see from across the room that her knuckles were white. No one moved. No one said anything. The folk singer finished her song and started another one. Adrian didn't think. He just closed his laptop, stood up, and walked over to her table. Excuse me, are you okay? Vanessa's head snapped up. For half a second, Adrian saw something raw in her face, something hurt and shocked and almost childlike. Then it disappeared behind the mask. I'm fine. Thank you. Adrian should have walked away. He knew he should have walked away. But there was something about the way she said it, the way her voice was just slightly too controlled, that made him pull out the chair across from her and sit down anyway. You're really not, though. Vanessa stared at him. I'm sorry. Do I know you? Adrian Hayes. I work in your cybersecurity division, floor 6. And you thought this was an appropriate time to introduce yourself? No, I thought this was an appropriate time to tell you that guy's an asshole and nothing he said was true. Vanessa blinked. Then, to Adrian's complete surprise, she laughed. It was short and sharp and didn't sound like it had much humor in it, but it was still a laugh. You don't know anything about me. I know you're sitting alone in a cafe at 8 o'clock on a Thursday, looking like someone just punched you in the stomach. I know that guy just spent 5 minutes telling you that being successful means you deserve to be lonely. And I know that's bullshit. That's a very confident assessment from someone who's worked for my company for, 2 years? 3 years, and I'm not confident. I'm just right. Vanessa studied him with the kind of focus that probably made executives sweat in boardrooms. Adrian felt his pulse kick up, but forced himself to hold eye contact. Why do you care? She asked finally. Because I've been where you are. Different context, same feeling. Adrian shrugged. My ex-wife spent the last year of our marriage telling me I was too boring, too predictable, too focused on being a good dad instead of being exciting. When she left, she told me I was the kind of person people settle for, not the kind they actually want. So I get it. I get how it feels when someone looks at your life and tells you the thing you're most proud of is actually the reason you're failing at everything else. Vanessa's expression had gone very still. She sounds delightful. She's not wrong, though. I am boring. I spend my nights debugging code and my weekends at playgrounds. I've worn the same 3 rotating outfits to work for a year because I can't be bothered to shop. My idea of a wild Friday is letting my daughter stay up past 9 to watch a movie. Adrian smiled a little. But boring doesn't mean broken, and powerful doesn't mean unlovable. Vanessa didn't say anything for a long moment. Outside, someone's car alarm went off and then stopped. The rain had softened to a drizzle. You're very presumptuous, she said quietly. I know, sorry, I'll leave you alone. Adrian started to stand up. Wait. He sat back down. Vanessa looked at her coffee, then at him. That man was Richard Holbrook. He's been on our board for 8 years and owns a 12% stake in the company. He's never liked me, but he's also never been that direct before, which means something's changed, something I don't know about yet. Or he's just a misogynist who's been waiting for an excuse to say what he's always thought. Maybe. Probably. Vanessa rubbed her temples. Do you know what the worst part is? Part of me wonders if he's right. Not about being unlovable. I don't need his validation for that. but about the isolation. I haven't had a real conversation with anyone outside of work in 6 months. I can't remember the last time someone asked me how I was doing and actually wanted to know the answer. Tonight I came here because my apartment felt too empty, and then I just sat in a corner booth scrolling through emails like, that's somehow better than being alone. Adrian didn't know what to say to that, so he didn't say anything. He just listened. I'm 30 years old, Vanessa continued, and I've spent the last 6 years building something I'm genuinely proud of. I've created jobs, driven innovation, changed an entire industry. But I go home every night to a penthouse apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows and 1,200 square feet of space I don't use because I'm always working. And the idea that maybe Richard's right, that maybe I've traded everything else for success, and I'm going to wake up at 50 still sitting alone in coffee shops, that terrifies me more than any board meeting ever could. Her voice had cracked on the last sentence. Just barely. Just enough. Adrian took a breath. Can I tell you something? Please. My daughter's name is Mia. She's 6 years old. When her mom left, Mia asked me if it was because she wasn't good enough. She asked me if maybe mommy would have stayed if Mia had been less messy, or less loud, or less weird. And I told her the same thing I'm going to tell you right now. Adrian leaned forward. The people who make you feel like you have to shrink yourself to be loved are the people who are never going to love you anyway. You don't fix that by changing who you are. You fix it by finding people who don't need you to be smaller. Vanessa's eyes had gone bright. She blinked rapidly, looked away, then back at him. You're very kind. I'm really not. I'm just tired of watching people blame themselves for other people's limitations. You don't even know me. No, Adrian admitted, but I know what it looks like when someone's drowning in public, and everyone else is too uncomfortable to acknowledge it. And I know that if I walked away right now, I'd spend the rest of the night wondering if I should have stayed. Vanessa smiled. It was small and sad, and the first genuine expression Adrian had seen on her face all night. Do you want to know something terrible? Always. This is the first real conversation I've had in months, and it's with an employee I didn't know existed until 5 minutes ago. That's pathetic. It's not pathetic. It's just lonely. Same thing. Not even close. They sat there for a while, not talking, just existing in the same space while the rain picked up again outside. The folk singer had given up and packed her guitar. The barista was wiping down tables and shooting them looks that suggested the cafe would be closing soon. Finally, Vanessa spoke. I should go. Early meeting tomorrow. Yeah, me too. Adrian stood up. For what it's worth, I think that guy was full of shit, and I think you're doing fine. I'm really not. Well, you're still here. That counts for something. Vanessa gathered her coat and bag, then paused. Adrian Hayes, Floor 6, Cybersecurity. That's me. If I asked you a hypothetical question, would you answer honestly? Probably. If the company's network were compromised, seriously compromised, not just a phishing attempt or minor breach, how long would it take you to detect it? Adrian frowned. Depends on the nature of the attack. Could be minutes, could be hours. Why? Because Richard Holbrook doesn't make social calls, and he doesn't give career advice out of kindness. He came here tonight to rattle me before next week's meeting, which means he knows something I don't. And the only thing that would give him that kind of confidence is leverage. You think someone's planning something. I think someone's already done something, and I just haven't found it yet. Vanessa pulled her coat tighter. Thank you for tonight, for listening, for not being like everyone else. Anytime. I mean that. She nodded once, then walked out into the rain without looking back. Adrian stood there in the empty cafe watching her disappear down the sidewalk and had the strangest feeling that something had just shifted in his life. Something he couldn't name yet, but would understand soon enough. 3 days later, everything went to hell. Adrian was in the middle of reviewing firewall logs when his system lit up with alerts. Not 1 or 2 alerts. Dozens. Cascading across his screen in angry red lines that meant something was very, very wrong. Jesus Christ, he muttered, fingers already flying across the keyboard. What's going on? Marcus, the analyst at the next desk, rolled his chair over. We're being hit. Someone's trying to brute force their way through the external authentication servers. Can you stop it? I'm trying. Adrian pulled up the network map, watched in real time as the attack spread like a virus through their systems. This isn't amateur hour. Whoever's doing this knows exactly what they're doing. He grabbed his phone and dialed his supervisor. It went to voicemail. He tried the department head. Same thing. "Where the hell is everyone?" "Emergency board meeting," Marcus said. "Started an hour ago. Something about quarterly projections." Adrian's stomach dropped. "Emergency board meeting. Vanessa's warning. Richard Holbrook." "This isn't a coincidence." "What?" "Nothing. Keep trying to reach someone upstairs. I'm going to the server room." Adrian didn't wait for a response. He grabbed his laptop and sprinted for the elevators, nearly colliding with someone from accounting. The ride down to sublevel 2 felt like it took hours. When the doors finally opened, he ran. The server room was freezing and humming with the sound of 1,000 machines working overtime. Adrian swiped his badge, entered his code, and pushed through the door into a space that looked like something from a science fiction movie. Rows and rows of black towers blinking with green and amber lights. He pulled up the central control terminal and immediately saw the problem. Someone had planted a backdoor in their system weeks ago, maybe longer, just waiting for the right moment to activate. Now it was awake and spreading, systematically targeting their client database. If this breach went through, they'd lose everything. Client information, proprietary data, trade secrets. Sinclair Technologies would be finished. Adrian's hands were shaking as he typed. He built a virtual barrier around the database, rerouted traffic, killed the infected processes. The attack adapted, found new pathways, kept pushing. Come on, Adrian whispered. An alarm started blaring somewhere in the building. His phone buzzed with automated security alerts. He ignored all of it, eyes locked on the screen, watching lines of code battle other lines of code in a war that would be invisible to anyone who didn't know how to look. The door behind him slammed open. "What the hell is happening?" Vanessa's voice cut through the noise like a knife. Adrian didn't look up. "Major breach. Someone planted a worm weeks ago and activated it during your board meeting. They're going after the client database. Can you stop it?" "I'm trying." Vanessa moved to stand beside him, watching the screen. Even in the middle of a crisis, Adrian noticed she'd abandoned her usual pristine appearance. Her hair was coming loose from its bun, her blouse was wrinkled, and there were dark circles under her eyes that suggested she hadn't slept in days. "The board meeting was a setup," she said quietly. "Richard Holbrook spent an hour presenting concerns about my leadership. Then someone anonymously leaked a report suggesting financial irregularities in our last acquisition. Complete fabrication, but it kept everyone in that room arguing while this happened. He's trying to force you out. He's trying to destroy the company so he can buy the pieces for nothing." Vanessa's voice was steady, but Adrian could hear the rage underneath. "How long until you know if you can stop this?" 5 minutes, maybe less." "What do you need?" "Time, and for no one to interrupt me." Vanessa pulled out her phone and made a call. "Security. Lockdown sublevel 2. No one in or out without my direct authorization. I don't care who asks. If the CEO himself shows up, you turn him away." She paused. "I am the CEO, David. Just do it." She ended the call and stood there, arms crossed, watching Adrian work. The silence between them was tense but not uncomfortable. If anything, it felt like they were on the same team for the first time. Adrian isolated the infected sectors, built a quarantine protocol, and started systematically removing the malicious code. It was like performing surgery with a sledgehammer. One wrong move and he'd bring down the entire network. "Got it," he said finally. "The worm's contained. Database is secure." "Are you sure?" 90% sure. I need to run a full diagnostic to be certain, but the immediate threat is neutralized." Vanessa let out a breath that sounded like she'd been holding it for hours. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. Whoever did this is going to try again. This was too sophisticated to be a one-time thing." "Then we'll be ready next time." Vanessa looked at him, really looked at him, and Adrian felt something shift in the air between them. "You saved the company tonight." "I did my job." "You did more than that. Most people would have escalated and waited for someone else to make the decision. You acted." She smiled, and it was nothing like the polite corporate smile Adrian had seen in meetings. This one was real. "I'm glad you were here." "Me too." They stood there in the freezing server room, surrounded by blinking machines, and the aftermath of a crisis that could have destroyed everything, and Adrian thought about that night in the cafe. About Vanessa sitting alone in a corner booth, convinced she was too powerful to be loved. He thought about how she looked right now, exhausted and furious, and maybe a little bit scared, but still standing, still fighting. And he thought, not for the first time and definitely not for the last, this woman is going to change my life. He just didn't know yet how right he was. The next 72 hours were a blur. Adrian slept maybe 8 hours total, lived on coffee and whatever takeout Marcus brought to the office, and ran security protocols until his eyes burned. They found 3 more back doors in the system, each one more sophisticated than the last. Whoever had planned this hadn't just wanted to steal data, they'd wanted to systematically dismantle the company from the inside. Vanessa practically moved into the office. Adrian would see her at 2 in the morning, still in her work clothes, pacing the executive floor while she talked on the phone. Sometimes she'd come down to sublevel 2 and just watch him work, not saying anything, just being present. On the 3rd night, she brought him coffee. "You look like death," she said, setting a paper cup on his desk. "Thank you. You're very kind." "I'm serious. When was the last time you went home?" Adrian had to think about it. "Thursday? It's Sunday." "Is it?" He rubbed his face. "I need to call my daughter. I was supposed to have her this weekend." "Go home, Adrian." "Can't. I'm still running diagnostics on the financial systems. If there's anything hiding in there, we need to find it before the board meeting tomorrow." "The board meeting's been postponed. I'm not walking into that room until I have proof of what Richard did. And proof takes time." Vanessa sat down in Marcus's empty chair. "You've been running on fumes for 3 days. You're going to crash." "I'll crash after we're secure." "We're secure enough. You built a fortress around our systems. Whatever else is hiding in there, it can wait until Monday." Adrian wanted to argue, but the truth was he could barely keep his eyes open. The code on his screen had started to blur together hours ago. "Fine, I'll go home, but I'm taking my laptop." "Of course you are," Vanessa smiled. "Before you go, I need to ask you something." "Shoot. How did you know?" "That night in the cafe you said I should be careful. How did you know something was coming?" Adrian shrugged. "I didn't, not really. I just knew that when powerful people start questioning your competence right before a major meeting, they usually have something planned. And when they're confident enough to do it in public, they think they've already won." "Richard thought he'd won," Vanessa said quietly. "He thought the attack would succeed, and the board would blame me for the security failure. He'd position himself as the experienced hand who could guide the company through the crisis, force me out, and buy up shares for nothing during the panic." She shook her head. "He didn't count on you. He didn't count on someone actually doing their job. That's different." "No, Adrian, it's not." Vanessa leaned forward. "Do you know how many people in this company would have just followed protocol and escalated the problem? How many would have spent hours trying to reach their supervisor instead of acting? You saw a crisis and you handled it. That's rare." "It's really not." "It is in my world." They looked at each other for a moment. Adrian noticed details he'd been too busy to notice before. The way Vanessa's eyes were more gray than blue, the small scar on her left eyebrow, the fact that she looked somehow younger when she wasn't performing for an audience. "I should go," he said finally, "before I fall asleep at this desk." "Go, rest, spend time with your daughter." Vanessa stood up. "And Adrian, thank you, again." "Stop thanking me. You're going to give me a complex." "Good. You should have a complex. You saved everything I've built." Adrian packed up his laptop and grabbed his jacket from the back of his chair. He was halfway to the elevator when Vanessa called after him. "Adrian?" He turned around. "That thing you said, about finding people who don't need you to be smaller." She smiled, and it looked almost shy. "I think you might be right about that." Adrian didn't know what to say, so he just nodded and got in the elevator. As the doors closed, he caught one last glimpse of Vanessa standing alone in the middle of the cybersecurity department, surrounded by empty desks and humming computers, looking like a queen surveying a battlefield she'd won at great cost. The elevator descended. Adrian closed his eyes and let exhaustion wash over him. Outside, the sun was starting to rise over Chicago. Monday was coming. The board meeting was coming. Whatever happened next, they'd face it together. Adrian just hoped they were both ready for what that meant. Adrian's apartment smelled like old pizza and regret when he finally stumbled through the door at 6:30 Sunday morning. He dropped his laptop bag on the couch, kicked off his shoes, and stood in the middle of his living room trying to remember what normal people did when they came home. Shower. That was a thing. Maybe food. His phone buzzed. A text from Chloe. "Mia's asking about you. When are you picking her up?" Adrian stared at the message. He'd promised Mia he'd have her this weekend. They were supposed to go to the aquarium on Saturday, then make homemade pizza and watch movies until she fell asleep on the couch. Instead, he'd spent 3 days in a freezing server room fighting a cyber attack while his daughter wondered why he'd disappeared. "Can I get her this afternoon?" "Work emergency." "I'm sorry." The reply came back fast. "This is exactly what I'm talking about, Adrian. She needs stability, not a father who cancels on her every time his job gets busy." He typed and deleted 4 different responses before settling on, "I'll be there at 2. I promise." The shower helped. The coffee helped more. By noon, Adrian had slept 4 hours, changed into clean clothes, and almost felt human again. He grabbed the stuffed penguin he'd bought Mia 3 weeks ago and forgotten to give her, then headed out. Chloe's new place was in Lincoln Park, a renovated brownstone that probably cost 3 times what Adrian paid in rent. Her boyfriend answered the door, tall, good-looking in that gym membership way, wearing a fitted polo shirt that showed off arms Adrian would never have no matter how many push-ups he did. "Hey man, Adrian, right?" "That's me." "Brett?" He stuck out his hand. Adrian shook it, trying not to feel like he was being sized up. "Mia's almost ready. She's pretty excited to see you." "Good. That's good." They stood there in awkward silence until Chloe appeared, pulling Mia by the hand. His daughter lit up when she saw him. "Daddy!" Adrian knelt down and caught her in a hug that felt like the first real thing he'd experienced in days. Mia smelled like strawberry shampoo and that specific kid sweat that came from running around all morning. "Hey, Bug. I missed you." "You were supposed to come yesterday. Mommy said you had to work." "I did. I'm sorry, but I'm here now and we're going to have the best afternoon ever." "Can we still go to the aquarium?" "Absolutely." Chloe crossed her arms. She'd lost weight since the divorce, started wearing her hair differently. Everything about her seemed sharper now, more angular. "You look terrible," she said. "Thank you. You look great too." "I'm serious. When was the last time you slept?" "Recently-ish." Adrian stood up, keeping one hand on Mia's shoulder. "We should go. I'll have her back by 8. "Adrian?" Chloe's voice had that tone he remembered from their last year together, the one that meant a lecture was coming. "This is exactly what I was worried about when we split up. You're so focused on being the perfect employee that you forget about being a present father. Mia needs... I know what Mia needs, and I'm handling it. Are you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're running yourself into the ground and disappointing your daughter in the process." Brett put a hand on Chloe's shoulder. "Babe, maybe not right now." She shook him off. "No, he needs to hear this. Adrian, you can't keep doing this. You can't keep prioritizing a job that doesn't care about you over a daughter who does." Adrian felt something hot rising in his chest. He pushed it down. "Not in front of Mia." "I'll have her back by 8, he repeated. Then to Mia, "Come on, Bug. Let's go see some penguins." They left. Adrian didn't look back, but he could feel Chloe watching them from the doorway. Judging, measuring, finding him lacking like she'd been doing for the last 2 years of their marriage. Mia grabbed his hand as they walked to the car. "Mommy's mad at you." "Mommy's not mad. She just worries." "She told Brett you care more about work than us." Adrian's stomach dropped. "She said that in front of you?" "I was supposed to be in my room, but I heard." Mia looked up at him with eyes that were way too serious for 6 years old. "Do you care more about work than me?" "No, never, not even close." "Then why weren't you here yesterday?" Adrian unlocked the car and helped Mia into her booster seat. He took his time buckling her in, trying to figure out how to explain corporate espionage and cyber attacks to a first grader. Sometimes at work, bad things happen that only certain people can fix. And this weekend, one of those bad things happened, and I was one of the only people who could stop it, so I had to stay. "What kind of bad thing?" The kind that would have hurt a lot of people if I didn't help. Mia thought about this. Like a superhero? Not really. More like a janitor cleaning up a really big mess. That sounds boring, Adrian laughed. It kind of is. But it's important. More important than the aquarium? No, nothing's more important than you, Bug. Sometimes I just have to do the important but not as important things first, so I can do the most important things right. He kissed her forehead. Does that make sense? Not really. Yeah, me neither. Come on, let's go look at fish. The aquarium was crowded with families doing exactly what Adrian and Mia were doing, trying to salvage a Sunday afternoon together. They watched the beluga whales, stared at the jellyfish until Mia got bored, and spent 20 minutes in the penguin exhibit because Mia had decided penguins were her new favorite animal. That one's you, she announced, pointing at a penguin standing alone near the rocks while the others swam. Why's that one me? Because he looks tired and he's by himself. Adrian didn't know whether to laugh or call a child psychologist. They got ice cream after, sat on a bench overlooking the lake while Mia dripped chocolate down her shirt and told him everything he'd missed over the weekend. Her friend Emma had a birthday party. She'd learned a new song in music class. Brett had made pancakes that were too thick and tasted weird. Do you like him? Adrian asked. Brett? Mia shrugged. He's okay. He tries really hard to be fun, but it feels fake, like he looked up how to talk to kids on the internet. That's very perceptive. What's perceptive mean? It means you're smart and you notice things. Oh, then yeah, I'm that. She finished her ice cream and leaned against Adrian's side. Daddy? Yeah, Bug? Are you and Mommy ever going to get back together? There it was. The question Adrian had been dreading since the day he'd moved out. No, sweetheart, we're not. Why not? Because sometimes people love each other, but they're not good at being married to each other. Your mom and I are better friends now than we were when we lived together. You're not friends. You barely talk. We're working on it. Mia was quiet for a moment. Then, Emma's parents got divorced, and now she has 2 houses and 2 Christmases and 2 birthdays. She says it's awesome. Is that what you think? That it's awesome? I think it's lonely. I don't like having 2 houses. I want one house where everyone lives together and nobody's mad. Adrian pulled her closer. I'm sorry, Bug. I'm sorry things didn't work out the way we planned. But you know what hasn't changed? What? How much I love you, Seth. That's the same in 1 house or 2 houses or 1,000,000 houses. You're stuck with me forever. Promise? Promise. They sat there watching the lake until Mia announced she was hungry again, which was how they ended up at a diner near Adrian's apartment splitting a burger and fries, while Mia told him the entire plot of a movie she'd watched twice that weekend. By the time they got back to his place, it was almost 6, and Mia was crashing from the sugar and excitement. Adrian put on a movie neither of them watched. Mia fell asleep halfway through, curled up against his side like she used to when she was smaller. He sat there in the dim light of his living room, one hand on his daughter's back, and thought about Vanessa standing alone in the office at sunrise. The people who make you feel like you have to shrink yourself to be loved are the people who are never going to love you anyway. He'd said that to Vanessa, but he'd been talking to himself too. Chloe had spent their entire marriage making him feel like he wasn't enough, not exciting enough, not ambitious enough, not present enough, even when he was standing right there. And he'd believed her. He'd internalized it so completely that even now, 8 months after the divorce, he still heard her voice in his head whenever he made a decision. His phone buzzed, a text from a number he didn't recognize. This is Vanessa. I got your number from HR. Hope that's not weird. I wanted to check if you made it home okay. Adrian stared at the message for a solid 10 seconds before responding. Not weird. I'm home. Currently being used as a pillow by a 6-year-old. That sounds nice. It is. How are things at the office? Quiet. Everyone went home for the night. I should probably do the same, but my apartment feels wrong right now. Wrong how? Too empty, too quiet. Like I'm the only person left in the world and everyone else figured out where they're supposed to be. Adrian looked at Mia's sleeping face, thought about Chloe's accusations, and made a decision that was probably stupid but felt right anyway. Want to grab dinner tomorrow? Somewhere that's not the office? The typing indicator appeared and disappeared 3 times before her response came through. Are you asking me on a date? I'm asking if you want company while you eat food. You can call it whatever you want. That's the worst non-answer I've ever heard. I'm jet-lagged and running on fumes. Best I can do. Another pause. Then, okay, but you're buying. Deal. Adrian smiled at his phone like an idiot. Across the room, the movie reached its climax and the hero saved the day through a combination of luck and determination. Real life was never that clean, Adrian thought. Real life was messy and complicated and full of moments where you had to choose between being smart and being brave. He was still thinking about that when he drove Mia back to Chloe's place at 8. His ex-wife met them at the door looking concerned. She's exhausted. We had a big day. Adrian handed over Mia's backpack. I'll have her again next weekend, both days. I already cleared it with work. Chloe's expression softened slightly. Okay, that's good. She misses you when you're gone too long. I know, I'm working on it. They stood there for a moment, and Adrian felt the ghost of who they used to be hovering between them. They'd been happy once, not deliriously happy, but content, comfortable. Until Chloe had decided comfortable wasn't enough, and Adrian had realized he'd been holding his breath for years, waiting for her to say it. I'm sorry, Chloe said quietly. About earlier, I was too harsh. You were honest. That's different. Still, you're doing your best. I know that. She glanced back into the house where Brett was probably waiting. I just want her to be okay. And you to be okay, that's all. We're getting there. Are you? She looked at him closely. Because you look like you're barely holding it together. Story of my life. Adrian kissed Mia's head. See you next week, Bug. Bye, Daddy. Daddy. He drove home through streets that were starting to feel like autumn, windows down, radio playing something he didn't recognize. His phone buzzed twice more before he parked. 2 texts from Vanessa. Just to be clear, if this is a date, you should know I'm terrible at dating. Also, I have a board meeting at 9, so we'll need to eat early. Is 6:30 too early for normal people? Adrian responded while climbing the stairs to his apartment. 6:30 is perfect, and if it makes you feel better, I'm terrible at dating too. We'll be terrible together. That's strangely comforting. I'm full of strange comfort. It's my superpower. I thought your superpower was saving failing companies from cyberattacks. That's my day job. Strange comfort is my side hustle. He could almost hear her laughing through the phone. Monday morning arrived too fast and with too much coffee required. Adrian showed up at the office at 7 to find the cybersecurity department already buzzing with activity. Marcus practically jumped on him the second he walked in. Dude, where have you been? Home. Sleeping. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Everything's right. You're a hero. Vanessa sent a company-wide email yesterday about the attack and how you stopped it single-handedly. HR's been asking about you. Finance wants to talk. And rumor is the board meeting this morning is specifically about what happened. Adrian's stomach dropped. That doesn't sound good. Are you kidding? That sounds amazing. You saved the company, man. People are going to remember that. People are also going to ask questions I might not want to answer. Like what? Like how I knew to act so fast, like why I didn't follow protocol, like whether I had help from anyone upstairs who might have given me information I wasn't supposed to have. Marcus's expression shifted from excited to worried. Oh, yeah. That could be bad. That could be very bad. Adrian spent the next 2 hours preparing documentation for every decision he'd made during the attack, building a timeline that showed exactly how he'd detected and responded to the breach. By 9 o'clock, he had a 70-page report that would either clear him of any suspicion or make him look even more suspicious depending on how paranoid the board was feeling. At 9:30, his phone rang. Unknown number. This is Adrian. Mr. Hayes, this is Catherine Pierce from Executive Affairs. Ms. Sinclair would like you to attend the board meeting this morning. Can you be in the executive conference room in 20 minutes? Adrian's heart rate doubled. Yes, I'll be there. Excellent. Please bring any documentation related to the security incident this weekend. The board will have questions. She hung up. Adrian sat there staring at his phone. You okay? Marcus asked. I'm being summoned to a board meeting. That's good, right? Or it's terrible. Hard to say. Adrian grabbed his laptop and the printed report. If I'm not back in 2 hours, tell my daughter I love her. You're being dramatic. I'm being realistic. The executive floor was everything the cybersecurity department wasn't: polished, expensive, designed to intimidate. Adrian signed in with a receptionist who looked at him like she was trying to figure out what he'd done to deserve being there, then waited in a leather chair that probably cost more than his car. Vanessa appeared from around the corner at exactly 9:50. She was back in full corporate armor, tailored navy suit, hair in that severe bun, expression neutral. But when she saw Adrian, something flickered across her face. Relief, maybe, or concern. Thank you for coming on short notice. Did I have a choice? Not really. She sat down next to him, lowering her voice. The board wants to understand exactly what happened this weekend. Richard's been spinning a narrative that the attack was preventable and that our security protocols failed because of management incompetence. Your incompetence, you mean? Yes, he's positioning this as proof that I've lost control of the company. Vanessa glanced toward the conference room. I need you to tell them exactly what you told me. No embellishments, no heroics, just the facts. And if the facts make Richard look bad, then the facts make Richard look bad. She met his eyes. Can you do this? Yeah, I think so. Good. She stood up. One more thing. Whatever happens in there, whatever they ask you, don't lie to protect me. This company has survived worse than a bruised CEO ego, but it won't survive a cover-up. Before Adrian could respond, the conference room door opened and someone called Vanessa's name. She straightened her jacket, took a breath, and walked in. Adrian followed. The boardroom was ridiculous. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a table that looked like it belonged in a medieval castle, 12 leather chairs occupied by people who collectively controlled billions of dollars. Richard Holbrook sat at the far end, looking smug. Vanessa took her seat at the head of the table. Adrian was directed to a chair against the wall, close enough to hear everything but far enough to feel like a spectator. Let's begin, said an older woman Adrian didn't recognize. Ms. Sinclair, you've requested this meeting to address the security incident this weekend. Please proceed. Vanessa didn't waste time. She outlined the attack, the response, the containment, and the ongoing investigation, all in the kind of clinical detail that made it sound like she'd personally fought the hackers hand to hand. When she finished, Richard leaned forward. That's a compelling narrative, Vanessa, but it doesn't address the fundamental question. How did this breach happen in the first place? Someone with inside knowledge planted multiple backdoors in our system over a period of weeks, possibly months. They knew our protocols. They knew our vulnerabilities. Inside knowledge suggests inside help. Richard's smile was thin. Who had access to those systems? Dozens of people across multiple departments. But who had administrative access? Who could move through our network without triggering alerts? Adrian felt the room's attention shift toward him even though nobody was looking at him directly. Vanessa's expression didn't change. Our senior infrastructure team, our database administrators, and a handful of executive-level accounts. And yet it was a junior analyst who detected and stopped the attack, not our senior infrastructure team, not our security director, a level 3 employee with 3 years at the company. Richard pulled out a folder. Adrian Hayes, 32 years old, divorced, no advanced degrees, no history of handling breaches at this scale, and somehow he single-handedly saved the company while our entire security apparatus failed. He did his job exceptionally well under enormous pressure. I don't see how that's suspicious. I think it's very suspicious. I think it suggests either extraordinary luck or prior knowledge of the attack. Richard looked directly at Adrian. Mr. Hayes, would you mind joining us at the table? Adrian stood up on legs that felt unsteady and moved to the empty chair next to Vanessa. Every pair of eyes in the room was on him now. Mr. Hayes, Richard continued, can you explain how you detected an attack that our automated systems missed? Adrian took a breath. Facts. Just the facts. The automated systems didn't miss it. They flagged it. But the alerts were being suppressed by one of the backdoor protocols. I only noticed because I was manually reviewing authentication logs looking for anomalies in traffic patterns. Why were you doing that on a Sunday morning? Because Miss Sinclair asked me to. The room went very quiet. I'm sorry, Richard said slowly. Are you saying the CEO personally directed you to investigate our security systems days before this attack occurred? Adrian felt Vanessa go tense beside him. He just made this infinitely worse. Miss Sinclair mentioned she was concerned about potential vulnerabilities. I was running routine diagnostics. Based on what evidence? Based on professional instinct. Richard laughed. It wasn't a nice sound. Professional instinct. From a level 3 analyst. Forgive me if I find that hard to believe. Believe whatever you want. I did my job. Your job was to follow protocol. Protocol says you escalate to your supervisor, who escalates to the security director, who evaluates the threat and determines appropriate response. Instead, you bypassed all of that and went straight to the server room. Why? Because by the time I'd followed protocol, the breach would have been complete. The attackers were counting on us following protocol. Or you already knew about the attack because you helped plan it. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Adrian felt his pulse hammering in his ears. That's absurd, Vanessa said sharply. Is it? Think about it. An underpaid analyst with access to our systems, a pending divorce, a 6-year-old daughter to support. How much would someone pay for inside access to Sinclair Technologies? 50,000? 100? Maybe more if the information was valuable enough. Adrian's hands clenched under the table. I'm not a criminal. Then explain to me how you knew exactly where to look, exactly what to do, and exactly how to stop an attack that required weeks of planning and execution. Explain how a level 3 analyst performed at the level of a senior security architect unless you had help, or prior knowledge, or both. I can explain it, Vanessa interrupted. Mr. Hayes is significantly underpaid and underutilized for his skill level. That's an HR failure, not evidence of conspiracy. So you admit you've been grooming him for promotion. I admit I didn't know he existed until last week, and now I'm wondering why our executive team hasn't already promoted him. Perhaps because they were being cautious. Perhaps because something about his rapid response raised red flags that you're choosing to ignore because he saved your company. Or because, Richard paused meaningfully, your judgment regarding Mr. Hayes is compromised for other reasons. Vanessa's face went cold. What are you implying, Richard? I'm implying that a CEO who has dinner with a junior employee the night before a major security incident and then personally directs that same employee to investigate vulnerabilities that just happen to exist creates an appearance of impropriety that this board can't ignore. Adrian's stomach dropped through the floor. They'd been watching Vanessa, maybe watching him too. Where I eat dinner and with whom is none of this board's concern, Vanessa said quietly. It is when it affects your judgment. It is when it suggests personal involvement with an employee. It is when it raises questions about whether this entire incident was manufactured to make you look like a hero who saved the company you almost destroyed through negligence. That's enough. The older woman who'd been silent until now spoke up, her voice cut through the room like a knife. Richard, you've made your point. Mr. Hayes, thank you for your time. You're dismissed. Adrian looked at Vanessa. She gave a slight nod. He stood up, grabbed his laptop, and walked out of the conference room on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. The door closed behind him. He could hear raised voices even through the thick walls. Vanessa and Richard shouting over each other while the rest of the board tried to moderate. Adrian didn't stick around to listen. He went straight to the elevator, rode it down to floor 6, and walked past Marcus without saying a word. His hands were shaking when he sat down at his desk. Not from fear, from rage. He pulled up his calendar and canceled his dinner plans with Vanessa. Then he opened his email and started writing his resignation letter. He was 3 paragraphs in when someone cleared their throat behind him. Adrian turned around. Vanessa stood there, jacket off, hair coming loose, looking like she'd just been through a war. Don't resign, she said. How did you? Because I know how you think, and I know what you're about to do, and I'm telling you don't. She pulled over Marcus's empty chair and sat down. Richard's full of shit. The board knows he's full of shit. They're voting right now on whether to investigate his connection to the attack. They think he planned it? I have proof he met with the security consultant who designed our infrastructure 3 weeks before the breach. I have proof he's been talking to potential buyers about acquiring the company. I don't have proof he orchestrated the attack, but I have enough to make the board very nervous about his motivations. Adrian saved his resignation letter and closed the window. He accused you of having inappropriate relations with an employee. He accused me of having dinner with someone, which I did, because I wanted to. And if the board has a problem with that, they can fire me. Vanessa, stop. Listen to me. She leaned forward. I'm not going to let Richard destroy your career because he's scared of losing control. I'm not going to let him use our friendship, or whatever this is, as ammunition. And I'm not going to let you quit because you think you're protecting me. You don't know what I'm thinking. I know exactly what you're thinking. You're thinking that you made things worse for me in there. You're thinking that your presence in my life is a liability. You're thinking that the easiest solution is to remove yourself from the equation. Vanessa's voice softened. And you're wrong. Am I? Because from where I'm sitting, Richard just handed the board a narrative about how the CEO is compromised by personal relationships. That narrative doesn't go away just because you have dirt on him. So we give them a better narrative. We show them you're the best security analyst this company has, that you were promoted based on merit, and that who I eat dinner with is irrelevant to my ability to run this company. And if they don't buy it, then I quit and we start our own firm. Vanessa smiled. It was tired, but real. I'm serious. I've been thinking about it for months. Why work for a board that doesn't trust me when I could work for myself? Adrian stared at her. You're actually insane. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just tired of being afraid. She stood up. Dinner's still on, by the way. 6:30. Don't be late. She walked away before Adrian could respond. He sat there in his cubicle, surrounded by humming computers and fluorescent lights, and tried to figure out what the hell had just happened. His phone buzzed. A text from Marcus, who'd apparently been listening from somewhere nearby. Holy shit, dude. The CEO just declared her undying loyalty to you in the middle of the office. That's either the most romantic thing ever or the most professionally stupid thing ever, Adrian typed back. Probably both. So are you going to dinner? Adrian looked at his resignation letter, still saved in his drafts folder. He thought about Chloe's accusations, about Mia asking if he cared more about work than her, about Vanessa standing in a boardroom defending him while 12 billionaires questioned her judgment. He thought about that night in the cafe when she had admitted she was terrified of ending up alone. And he thought about how he'd felt the exact same way for years, but had been too scared to say it out loud. Yeah, I'm going to dinner. You're either very brave or very stupid. Definitely the second one. Adrian deleted his resignation letter. Then he opened a new window and started documenting everything he knew about the attack, building a case that would either clear his name or bury him. He worked through lunch, through the afternoon, through the moment when the office started emptying out for the day. At 6:15, he closed his laptop, straightened his shirt, and headed for the elevator. His hands were still shaking slightly. His heart was still hammering. But for the first time in months, Adrian Hayes felt like he was moving towards something instead of just surviving. The elevator doors opened on the ground floor. Vanessa was waiting in the lobby, also in jeans and a sweater instead of her usual armor. She looked younger like this, more uncertain. Hi, she said. Hi. I wasn't sure you'd show. I wasn't sure either, Adrian smiled. But I'm here. Good. Know a place that makes terrible wine and amazing pasta. Sound okay? Sounds perfect. They walked out into the Chicago evening together, side by side but not touching. And if anyone was watching, they didn't notice. Or maybe they did notice and just didn't care. Either way, Adrian thought, this was happening. Whatever this was, it was happening, and he was done being afraid of it. Behind them, the Sinclair Technologies building rose into the darkening sky, full of people working late, fighting battles, building empires. Inside one of those offices, Richard Holbrook was probably plotting his next move. Inside another, the board was probably still arguing about what to do with a CEO who'd chosen loyalty over politics. But out here, on the street, with the city noise swelling around them and the smell of autumn in the air, none of that mattered. Out here, they were just two people who'd found each other in a coffee shop and decided that maybe, possibly, they could build something neither of them had expected. Adrian didn't know if it would work. He didn't know if they could survive the scrutiny, the gossip, the professional complications. But as they turned the corner toward the restaurant, Vanessa's shoulder brushed his, and he thought maybe not knowing was okay. Maybe not knowing was the whole point. The restaurant was tucked into a basement on a side street Adrian had walked past 100 times without noticing. The kind of place that didn't need a sign because the people who belonged there already knew where it was. Inside, it smelled like garlic and red wine and years of conversations absorbed into brick walls. They got a table in the back corner. Vanessa ordered a bottle of Chianti that the waiter warned them was an acquired taste, which turned out to mean it tasted like vinegar someone had left in a barn for 6 months. Adrian tried not to make a face after the first sip. Failed. "Told you it was terrible," Vanessa said. "You weren't kidding." Adrian pushed his glass away. "Why do we keep drinking it?" "Because admitting defeat feels worse than pretending to enjoy it." She took another sip and grimaced. "Okay, no, I can't do this." "Waiter?" They switched to beer. The pasta, when it arrived, was everything Vanessa had promised. Fresh linguine with clams that tasted like the ocean, bread that was still warm from the oven, the kind of simple food that made you understand why people built entire cultures around mealtimes. They ate in silence for a while, both of them too hungry to bother with conversation. Adrian couldn't remember the last time he'd eaten a real meal that wasn't takeout consumed standing over his kitchen sink. Probably sometime before the attack. Maybe before that. "Can I ask you something?" Vanessa said finally. "Sure." "Why didn't you leave? After what Richard said in that meeting, after he basically accused you of corporate espionage and implied we were sleeping together, why didn't you just walk away?" Adrian thought about the resignation letter still sitting in his drafts folder. "Honestly, I almost did. I had the letter written and everything." "What stopped you?" "You did. You walked into the office and told me not to quit before I'd even decided if I was going to quit. And I realized that if I left because Richard made things uncomfortable, I'd be proving him right. I'd be saying that, yeah, actually, this is inappropriate and shameful, and I should hide from it." "Is it inappropriate?" "Is what inappropriate?" Vanessa gestured between them. "This, whatever this is. A CEO having dinner with someone who works for her company. Is that crossing a line?" Adrian set down his fork. "I think it depends on why you're having dinner. If you're doing it because you want to manipulate me or because you think I owe you something for saving your job, then yeah, it's crossing a line. But if you're doing it because you're tired of eating alone and I'm tired of eating alone and we happened to find each other in a coffee shop 3 weeks ago, then no. I don't think it's crossing anything." Richard would disagree. Richard thinks powerful women should be grateful for any attention they get and shouldn't ask for more. His opinion doesn't matter. Vanessa smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. His opinion matters to the board, and the board matters to the company, and the company matters to 3,000 employees who depend on us not screwing this up. "So what are you saying? That we should stop having dinner because it might look bad?" "I'm saying I don't know what I'm saying." Vanessa pushed food around her plate. "I've spent 6 years building this company. 6 years proving I belong in that office. And in one morning, Richard almost undid all of it by suggesting my judgment was compromised because I had coffee with someone. If he can do that with coffee, what happens when it's more than coffee? What do you want it to be?" The question hung between them. Outside, someone walked past the restaurant window. Music drifted up from somewhere deeper in the building. Vanessa took a long drink of her beer. "I don't know," she said finally. "I'm 30 years old, and I've never had a relationship that lasted longer than 6 months. Not because the guys were wrong, but because I was. I worked 80-hour weeks and canceled dates for conference calls and treated relationships like items on a to-do list I could optimize if I just found the right system. Every single person I've dated has told me the same thing, that I'm married to my job and there's no room for anything else." "Were they right?" "Probably, yeah." She laughed, but it sounded hollow. "My last boyfriend broke up with me on my birthday. We were supposed to go to dinner, and I got stuck in a negotiation with a supplier in Singapore. I kept texting him saying I'd be there in an hour, just one more hour, and he finally texted back saying he was done waiting. He said I'd never choose him over work, and he was tired of competing with a company that would never love me back." "That's harsh." "That's accurate." Vanessa met his eyes. "So when I ask myself what I want this to be, the honest answer is I want it to be something I'm capable of maintaining, and I'm not sure I am. I'm not sure I know how to be in a relationship with an actual human being instead of a quarterly earnings report. Adrian absorbed that. The waiter came by to clear their plates and offer dessert, which they both declined. The restaurant was starting to empty out. It was getting late. "Can I tell you what I think?" Adrian asked. "Please." "I think you're using work as an excuse. I think you're scared of letting someone get close enough to hurt you, so you hide behind spreadsheets and board meetings and convince yourself you're too busy for anything else. And I think that guy who broke up with you on your birthday was probably right that you'd never choose him over work, but not because work is more important, because he never gave you a reason to choose him." Vanessa's expression had gone very still. "You don't know me well enough to make that assessment." "Maybe not, but I know what it looks like when someone's hiding. I did it for 2 years while my marriage fell apart. I told myself I was working late because the company needed me, but really, I was working late because going home meant facing the fact that Chloe and I had stopped being partners and started being roommates who occasionally had sex. It was easier to debug code than fix my marriage." "Did you try to fix it?" "Not really, not in any way that mattered." Adrian traced patterns in the condensation on his beer bottle. "Chloe asked me once what I wanted from life, like really wanted. Not what I thought I should want or what would make me a good dad or a good husband, but what I actually wanted deep down. And I couldn't answer. I didn't know. I'd spent so long being what everyone else needed that I'd forgotten how to want things for myself." "What do you want now?" Adrian looked at her. "I want to stop being afraid of wanting things. I want to believe that it's possible to build something with another person without one of us having to disappear in the process. And I want to have dinner with you again without either of us feeling like we need to justify it to anyone else." Vanessa didn't say anything for a long moment. Then she reached across the table and took his hand. Her fingers were cold from holding the beer glass. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay? Okay, let's try this. Whatever this is, let's try it and see what happens. Even if Richard throws another fit? Especially if Richard throws another fit." She squeezed his hand once, then let go. "But we do it right. No hiding, no sneaking around. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it like adults who have nothing to be ashamed of." "I can work with that." They paid the bill and walked out into a Chicago night that had turned cold while they were inside. Adrian offered his jacket. Vanessa declined. They walked side by side through streets that were quiet except for the occasional car and the distant sound of someone's music bleeding from an open window. "Where do you live?" Vanessa asked. "Logan Square. Little 2-bedroom about 20 minutes from here. You?" "River North. Penthouse apartment I bought 3 years ago and have spent maybe 12 nights in." She shoved her hands in her pockets. "It has a view of the entire city and floor-to-ceiling windows and custom Italian furniture I picked out of a catalog in under 10 minutes. It's absolutely stunning, and I hate every inch of it." "Why'd you buy it?" "Because it's the kind of place a successful CEO lives. Because the real estate agent told me it was a good investment. Because I thought having a beautiful home would make me feel less lonely. And instead it just gave me a bigger space to be lonely in." They reached the corner where they'd need to split in different directions. Neither of them moved. "I should let you go," Vanessa said. "It's late, and you probably have work tomorrow." "So do you." "I'm the CEO. I can be late." "Must be nice." "It's really not," she smiled. "Thank you for tonight, for listening, for not running away when things got complicated." Things were already complicated. This just makes them more interesting. Vanessa laughed. Then, before Adrian could process what was happening, she stepped forward and kissed him. It was quick and soft and tasted like beer and garlic. When she pulled back, her cheeks were flushed. "Sorry, I should have asked first." "You cannot ask first any time you want." "I'll keep that in mind." She stepped back, adjusting her jacket. "Good night, Adrian." "Good night." He watched her walk away until she disappeared around the corner, then stood there on the sidewalk trying to remember how to breathe normally. His phone buzzed. A text from Vanessa. "I'm smiling like an idiot on the train." "This is your fault," Adrian typed back while walking toward his own train stop. "Good. You should smile more. It looks good on you." "Careful. Compliments like that might give me ideas. I'm counting on it." He made it home around 11 and fell asleep still smiling. The next 3 weeks were the strangest of Adrian's life. He and Vanessa didn't hide what was happening between them, but they didn't exactly advertise it either. They had lunch a few times in the company cafeteria, where everyone could see them, but no one could hear their conversations. They texted constantly during the day, short messages that ranged from work questions to random observations to the kind of flirting that made Adrian feel like he was 25 again instead of 32 and divorced. The office gossip was immediate and predictable. People whispered in elevators. Someone created a poll about how long it would take HR to shut things down. Marcus cornered Adrian in the break room and demanded details. "Are you actually dating her, like officially?" "I don't know what officially means." "It means, are you boyfriend, girlfriend? Are you exclusive? Does she call you her partner in meetings?" "We've had dinner 3 times and coffee twice. I don't think we're at the partner in meeting stage." "But you want to be." Adrian poured coffee he didn't need just to have something to do with his hands. "Yeah, I want to be." "And she wants to be?" "I think so. Maybe. I don't know. We haven't really talked about it." Marcus stared at him. "You're dating the CEO of a billion-dollar company, and you haven't talked about whether you're actually dating. When you say it like that, it sounds stupid." "That's because it is stupid." Marcus grabbed his own coffee. "Look, I'm happy for you, genuinely. But you need to figure out what this is before someone else figures it out for you. Because right now, the entire company is watching you two try to pretend you're just colleagues who happen to eat lunch together 4 times a week, and nobody's buying it." Adrian knew Marcus was right. He knew they needed to have the conversation. But every time he thought about bringing it up, something got in the way. A meeting, a crisis. The simple fact that defining what they were doing felt like it might ruin what they were doing. Things got worse when the investigation into Richard Holbrook went public. Vanessa had been right. There was evidence linking him to the security consultant who designed their infrastructure. There were emails suggesting he'd been meeting with potential buyers. But there was no proof he'd orchestrated the cyber attack, and without proof, the board couldn't remove him. Instead, they reached what Vanessa called a deeply unsatisfying compromise. Richard would step back from day-to-day involvement with the company, but maintain his board seat. Vanessa would implement new security protocols and hire an external firm to audit their systems, and both of them would stop openly feuding in board meetings. "It's bullshit," Vanessa told Adrian over lunch. "He tried to destroy this company, and he gets a slap on the wrist because we can't prove it beyond reasonable doubt. At least he's not in charge anymore. He's still on the board, he still has influence, and he's definitely planning something else." She picked at her salad. "I can feel it. He's too quiet, too cooperative. Richard doesn't do quiet." "Maybe he learned his lesson, or maybe he's waiting for us to screw up so he can swoop in and finish what he started." Adrian reached across the table and took her hand. Around them, people were definitely noticing. He didn't care. "Let him wait. We'll be ready." Vanessa squeezed his fingers. "When did you become so optimistic?" "When I started spending time with someone who makes me want to be." She smiled at that. Then her phone buzzed and the moment broke. Work pulled her back to a conference call. Adrian went back to his desk. The day moved forward like all the other days, full of code and coffee and the low hum of anxiety that had become his baseline since the attack. At 5 o'clock, his phone rang. Unknown number. "This is Adrian." "Mr. Hayes, this is David Chen from Network Operations. We've got a situation." Adrian's stomach dropped. "What kind of situation?" "Automated alerts triggered about 20 minutes ago. Someone's trying to access our client database again. Same signature as the last attack." "I'll be right there." Adrian grabbed his laptop and ran for the elevators. This time, he didn't call ahead. He didn't warn anyone. He just moved, muscle memory taking over from the last time he'd done this. The server room was chaos when he arrived. David was at the main terminal, fingers flying across the keyboard. 2 other analysts Adrian recognized but didn't know well were pulling up diagnostics on secondary screens. "Talk to me," Adrian said. "They're using the same backdoor protocols we supposedly patched 3 weeks ago, but it's like they adapted, evolved. Whatever we did to stop them last time isn't working now." "Show me." Adrian leaned over David's shoulder and watched the attack unfold in real time. It was definitely the same group. He recognized their patterns. the way they moved through systems like water finding cracks. But David was right. They'd learned. They'd studied the defenses Adrian had built and figured out how to get around them. "Can you stop it?" David asked. "I don't know. Maybe." Adrian pulled up his own terminal. "Keep trying to isolate them. I'm going to build a secondary firewall around the database itself. If we can't keep them out, we can at least keep them contained." He worked. Lines of code poured across his screen. Around him, the other analysts were doing the same thing, building walls, closing doors, fighting an invisible enemy that kept finding new ways in. 20 minutes passed, then 40. Adrian's back was screaming from hunching over the keyboard. His eyes burned, but the attack was slowing, not stopping, but slowing. "I think we've got them," David said. "Database integrity is holding. They're still trying, but they're not making progress." "Don't celebrate yet. Last time every screen in the server room went black." Adrian's heart stopped. "What the hell was that?" "I don't know. Everything just shut down." "That's not possible. We have redundancies. We have backup power. The screens came back on. But instead of their normal interfaces, every single monitor was displaying the same message in bright red text. "You built a fortress. We built a siege. See you soon." Then the screens went black again. This time, they stayed black. "They killed the entire system," one of the analysts whispered. "No." Adrian was already pulling cables, checking connections. "They didn't kill it. They locked us out. It's still running. We just can't access it." "How is that possible?" "Because they're not trying to steal data anymore. They're trying to hold it hostage." Adrian's phone rang. "Vanessa." "Adrian, what's happening? Half the building just lost power." "We're under attack again. They locked us out of our own systems." "Can you fix it?" "I don't know. This is different from last time. They're not trying to breach the database. They're trying to control it." Vanessa was quiet for a moment. "I'm coming down." "You don't need to." "I'm already in the elevator." She arrived 3 minutes later, still in a business suit and heels that clicked against the server room floor. The analysts looked at her like she was a general arriving at the front lines. Maybe she was. "What do we know?" she asked. Adrian gave her the summary in 30 seconds. The attack, the lockout, the message. Vanessa listened without interrupting, her expression unreadable. "Can we call the FBI?" she asked when he finished. "And tell them what? That we got hacked again? They'll investigate for 6 months while our entire company sits dead in the water. So we fix it ourselves. I'm trying. But whoever's doing this knows our systems better than we do. They planned for everything we did last time. They're 2 steps ahead." Vanessa turned to face the darkened screens. "Then we change the game. Stop playing defense. Go on offense." "What does that mean?" "It means if they locked us out, there must be a key somewhere. Find the key." Adrian stared at her. "You want me to hack the hackers?" "I want you to do whatever it takes to get our systems back online before our clients realize we're dead in the water." She looked at him. "Can you do that?" Adrian thought about Richard Holbrook sitting somewhere watching this unfold. Thought about 3,000 employees who depended on this company staying functional. Thought about Vanessa standing in a server room at 6:30 on a Tuesday evening asking him to save everything she'd built. "Yeah," he said, "I can do that." The next 6 hours were a blur of code and coffee and increasingly desperate attempts to find a way back into their own systems. Adrian worked while the analysts watched, offering suggestions that he barely heard. His entire world had narrowed to the screen in front of him and the puzzle he was trying to solve. The attackers had locked them out by changing the authentication protocols at the deepest level of the system. But authentication systems needed backdoors for recovery. Everyone who built security into a network also built a way to bypass that security in case of emergencies. The attackers had used the company's own backdoor against them, which meant somewhere in the code there was a trapdoor, a weakness, something the attackers had missed. Adrian found it at 2 in the morning, a tiny gap in the authentication sequence, barely 3 lines of code that the attackers hadn't bothered to update because it looked like dead code that didn't do anything. But it wasn't dead. It was dormant. And if Adrian could wake it up, he could slip past the lockout and regain control. "I think I've got something," he said. David rolled his chair over. "What is it?" Remember when we upgraded the authentication system 6 months ago? We left the old protocols in place as a failsafe in case the new system crashed. The attackers locked us out of the new system, but they didn't touch the old one. Because the old one shouldn't work anymore. Right. But it's still there. And if I can activate it, Adrian typed for 10 more minutes. Then he hit enter. The screens flickered. Text scrolled across them. Initialization sequences, authentication requests, the beautiful, boring routine of systems coming back online. Holy shit, David said. You did it. Not yet. They're going to notice we're back in. We have maybe 10 minutes before they adapt and lock us out again. 10 minutes to do what? Adrian was already typing. 10 minutes to change all the locks so they can't get back in. He worked faster than he'd ever worked in his life. Changed passwords, reset authentication protocols, closed every door the attackers had opened and welded them shut. His hands were shaking. His vision was starting to blur. But he kept going. 5 minutes, 7, 9. At minute 9 and 30 seconds, he hit the final command and locked down the entire system. Then he sat back and waited to see if it would hold. The screens stayed on. The system stayed functional. Nobody tried to lock them out again. Is it over? David asked. I think so. Yeah. Adrian let out a breath that felt like he'd been holding it for hours. We're back. Vanessa had fallen asleep in one of the chairs around 3. She woke up now, blinking in the fluorescent light. Did we win? We won. Systems are secure. Database is intact. They can't get back in. She stood up and walked over to where Adrian was sitting. Without saying anything, she wrapped her arms around him from behind and rested her chin on his shoulder. The analyst politely looked away. Thank you, she said quietly. It's not over. They'll try again. Let them try. We'll be ready. Adrian closed his eyes and let himself sink into the feeling of her holding him. Around them, the server room hummed with the sound of machines doing what they were supposed to do. Outside, dawn was probably starting to break over Chicago. Tuesday was turning into Wednesday. The world kept spinning. I should go home, Adrian said finally. Get some sleep before I pass out on this keyboard. Come home with me instead. Adrian turned to look at her. What? Come home with me. To my apartment. The one I hate with the view I never look at. I don't want to be alone right now, and I don't think you do either. Vanessa? Don't overthink it. Just say yes or no. Adrian thought about his empty apartment in Logan Square. Thought about going home alone and staring at the ceiling while his brain refused to shut down. Thought about the way Vanessa was looking at him right now, like she was asking for something she'd never asked anyone for before. Yes, he said. They took a cab to her building in River North. Vanessa was right. The apartment was stunning in a way that felt sterile. Huge windows overlooking the city, furniture that looked like it belonged in a magazine, everything clean and sharp and completely devoid of personality. I told you I hated it, Vanessa said. It's not that bad. It's a showroom. It's what I thought successful people were supposed to live in. She kicked off her heels and collapsed onto the couch. Make yourself at home. There's beer in the fridge and probably some takeout containers from 3 weeks ago that I should throw away but haven't. Adrian sat down next to her. They were both exhausted, both running on fumes and adrenaline, but neither of them moved to go to bed. Can I ask you something? Vanessa said. Always. Why are you here? And I don't mean in my apartment. I mean here, in this situation with me. You could date anyone, someone normal with a normal job and normal problems, someone who doesn't drag you into server rooms at midnight to fight hackers. Why are you choosing this? Adrian thought about it. You remember that night in the cafe when Richard told you that powerful women end up alone? Hard to forget. I spent 2 years in a marriage where I felt alone even when my wife was sitting right next to me. I felt alone because Chloe looked at me and saw someone who wasn't enough, who would never be enough. And I convinced myself she was right. Adrian took Vanessa's hand. Then I met you, and you looked at me like I was exactly what you needed. Not more, not less, just right. And I realized I'd spent so long trying to be what other people wanted that I'd forgotten how it felt to be seen for who I actually am. Vanessa's eyes had gone bright. You're making me emotional, and I'm too tired to handle emotions. Sorry. Don't be. She leaned her head on his shoulder. For what it's worth, you're exactly what I needed too. I just didn't know it until you walked over to my table that night. They sat there in comfortable silence until Vanessa's breathing slowed and Adrian realized she'd fallen asleep. He carefully shifted so she was lying down with her head in his lap, then let his own eyes close. Outside, the city was waking up. Inside, two people who'd found each other in the chaos were finally, briefly, at peace. Adrian woke up to sunlight burning through floor-to-ceiling windows and the disorienting realization that he had no idea what time it was. His neck hurt from sleeping at a weird angle on Vanessa's couch. His mouth tasted like coffee and regret. Vanessa was gone. Her spot on the couch still warm, but empty. He found her in the kitchen, standing at the counter in an oversized shirt and leggings, staring at her phone like it had personally offended her. "Morning," Adrian said. She jumped. "Jesus, you're awake." "Barely. What time is it?" "Almost 11. I let you sleep." She held up her phone. "We have a problem." "Another attack?" "Worse. Someone leaked the story to the press. There's an article in the Tribune about the cyberattacks. It doesn't name sources, but it has details that only someone on the inside would know." Adrian took the phone and read. The article was careful. No direct accusations, no smoking gun, but it painted a picture of a company under siege, a CEO struggling to maintain control, and security failures that had happened multiple times under her watch. The comments section was already filling up with speculation about who was responsible and whether Sinclair Technologies was stable enough to trust with client data. "Richard," Adrian said. "Has to be. He's the only board member who'd benefit from making us look incompetent." Vanessa took the phone back. "The board's calling an emergency meeting for this afternoon. They want answers." "What are you going to tell them?" "The truth. That we've been targeted by a sophisticated attack, that we've successfully defended against it twice, and that we're implementing new security measures to prevent it from happening again." She poured coffee into a mug that said "World's Okayest CEO" in faded letters. "But the truth doesn't matter if they've already decided I've lost control, and this article makes it sound like I have." Adrian moved to stand next to her. "You haven't lost control. You've been fighting a war on two fronts, one against hackers and one against Richard. Most people couldn't handle one. Most people wouldn't have let it get this bad in the first place." She took a long drink of coffee. "I should have seen this coming. I should have known Richard would go to the press when the board investigation didn't pan out. I should have been 10 steps ahead instead of constantly playing catch-up. You can't predict everything. I'm the CEO. Predicting everything is literally my job." She set down the mug harder than necessary. "Do you know what the worst part is? I'm standing here in my apartment at 11 in the morning, drinking coffee with a man who technically works for me, and part of me doesn't care what the board thinks. Part of me wants to walk into that meeting and tell them if they don't like how I run this company, they can find someone else. And that's terrifying, because caring is the only thing that's kept me going for 6 years. If I stop caring, what's left?" Adrian didn't have an answer for that. He just took her hand and held it, while Chicago hummed outside the windows and the coffee got cold and the world kept demanding things neither of them knew how to give. "I should shower," Vanessa said finally. "Get ready for the meeting. You should probably go home, change clothes. Pretend you didn't spend the night here." "Do you want me to pretend?" She looked at him. "No, but I think we have to anyway. At least for today. At least until I know if I still have a company to run." Adrian left around noon, took the train back to Logan Square, showered in his own apartment, changed into clothes that didn't smell like server rooms, in desperation. He checked his phone. 12 messages from Marcus asking where he was. 3 from Chloe asking if he could take Mia this weekend. 1 from Mia herself, a voice message that was just her singing the alphabet song off-key. He listened to it twice, then called Chloe. "Hey, yeah, I can take Mia this weekend, both days if you want." "Really? Because last time you said that, you ended up working and I had to rearrange everything." "I know, I'm sorry, but I mean it this time. I'll pick her up Saturday morning and keep her through Sunday night. You and Brett can have a whole weekend." Chloe was quiet for a moment. "Is everything okay? You sound weird." "Everything's fine, just trying to be a better dad." "Adrian, I have to go. Work thing, but I'll see you Saturday." He hung up before she could push further. Then he stared at his phone and tried to figure out what he was actually doing: dating his boss, fighting hackers, lying to his ex-wife about why he sounded weird. This wasn't the life he'd imagined when he'd taken the job at Sinclair Technologies 3 years ago. That Adrian had wanted stability, safety, a paycheck that came on time and benefits that covered Mia's dental work. This Adrian wanted something he couldn't quite name yet, something that felt dangerous and right in equal measure. His phone buzzed. Vanessa. Meeting starts in an hour. Wish me luck. You don't need luck. You need ammunition. Give them hell. I'll try. Thank you for last night. For everything. Anytime. Adrian spent the afternoon trying to work from home and mostly failing. He pulled up diagnostics, ran security checks, reviewed logs. But his brain kept drifting back to that conference room where Vanessa was probably getting crucified by board members who'd already decided she'd failed. At 4:30, his phone rang. Marcus. Where are you? Home. Why? Because all hell is breaking loose here and you're missing it. What happened? Vanessa just walked out of the board meeting. Like mid-discussion, she stood up and left. People are saying she quit. Other people are saying she got fired. Nobody knows for sure, but it's chaos. Adrian's stomach dropped. Did you see her leave? No, but like 5 people did. She came out of the elevator, walked straight through the lobby, and got in a car. Didn't talk to anyone. And now Richard's telling people there's going to be a company-wide announcement tomorrow about new leadership direction. Shit. Yeah. So maybe you should come in, because if Vanessa's out, someone's going to need to explain what happened with the attacks, and you're the only one who knows the full story. Adrian was already grabbing his jacket. I'll be there in 30 minutes. He made it in 25. The office felt wrong when he walked in. Too quiet, too tense, like everyone was waiting for bad news and hoping it wouldn't come. Adrian went straight to the executive floor. The receptionist tried to stop him. Mr. Hayes, I'm not sure you're supposed to be up here right now. Is Vanessa in her office? Ms. Sinclair left a few hours ago. She didn't say when she'd be back. What about Richard Holbrook? Mr. Holbrook is in the conference room with several board members. They're not to be disturbed. Adrian ignored her and headed for Vanessa's office. The door was unlocked. Inside, everything looked normal. Too normal, like she'd stepped out for coffee and would be back any minute. Her computer was still on. Papers were spread across the desk. A half-empty cup of tea sat on the windowsill. He was about to leave when he noticed the envelope on her chair, his name written on the front in Vanessa's precise handwriting. Adrian picked it up and opened it. Adrian, if you're reading this, you've probably heard some version of what happened in the board meeting. Here's the real version. I didn't quit and I didn't get fired. I walked out because I realized I was about to agree to something I couldn't live with. The board wanted me to throw you under the bus. Not publicly, they're too smart for that, but internally. They wanted me to reassign you to a different department, put distance between us, and issue a statement saying the security incidents were the result of individual failures that have been addressed. They wanted me to make you the scapegoat so they could tell investors everything's fixed. I told them no. I told them you saved this company twice, and that if they wanted someone to blame, they could blame me. And Richard, because of course it was Richard leading this charge, said that my refusal to act proved I was compromised, that I was putting personal feelings ahead of company interests, that I was unfit to lead. And you know what? Maybe he's right. Maybe I am compromised, because when it came down to choosing between keeping my job and protecting you, I chose you. I chose you without hesitation, and I don't regret it. I'm taking a few days to figure out what comes next. The board can't fire me without a vote, and they don't have the votes yet, but they will eventually. Richard's been working on this for months. He's got people lined up. It's only a matter of time. I don't know what I'm going to do. Part of me wants to fight. Part of me wants to walk away and let Richard have the company he's been trying to steal. And part of me just wants to get in a car and drive until I run out of road. What I do know is this. Meeting you was the best thing that's happened to me in years. Maybe ever. You reminded me that there's more to life than quarterly earnings and board meetings. You made me want things I thought I'd given up on. And even if this whole thing falls apart, even if I lose the company and the title and everything I've built, I won't regret choosing you. Take care of yourself. Take care of Mia. And don't let Richard turn you into a villain. You're one of the good ones. V. Adrian read the letter 3 times. Then he pulled out his phone and called Vanessa. It went straight to voicemail. Hey, it's me. I got your letter, and I need you to know something. You didn't choose me over the company. You chose both of us over Richard's bullshit. There's a difference. He paused. I don't know where you are right now, but wherever it is, don't make any big decisions without talking to me first, please. Just call me back. He hung up and stood there in her empty office, holding a letter that felt like a goodbye he wasn't ready for. His phone rang. Not Vanessa. David from Network Operations. Adrian, we've got another situation. You've got to be kidding me. Wish I was. Someone just tried to access our backup servers. Different method than before, but same signature. I'm on my way. Adrian ran. Again. For the third time in as many weeks, he found himself sprinting toward the server room while everyone else went about their normal Wednesday evening like the world wasn't actively falling apart. David was waiting for him. It's contained, for now, but they're persistent. It's like they know exactly when we're vulnerable. Adrian pulled up the logs and immediately saw the problem. They do know. They've been inside our systems longer than we thought. They didn't just attack us twice. They've been living in our network for months, watching, learning, waiting for the right moment. How is that possible? We scrubbed everything after the first attack. We scrubbed everything we could see. But they left pieces of themselves behind, dormant code that looks like system processes but isn't. Adrian's fingers were already moving across the keyboard. They'd been playing the long game, and we've been playing catch-up. He spent the next 4 hours digging through every system, every backup, every piece of code that looked even slightly suspicious. What he found made his blood run cold. The attackers had been in their systems for at least 6 months. They'd been there before Adrian even met Vanessa, before the first attack. Before any of this started. They'd planted seeds that had slowly grown into a network of backdoors and hidden protocols, all designed to give them complete control when they wanted it. This is insane, David said, reading over Adrian's shoulder. How did we miss this? Because they're better than we are. Or they were. Adrian isolated the infected code and started building a purge protocol. Not anymore. It took until midnight, but he found every piece of malicious code the attackers had hidden and burned it out of the system. Then he rebuilt the security protocols from the ground up, using methods he'd been developing in his head for weeks, but had never had a chance to implement. When he finally finished, the network was cleaner than it had been in years. Maybe cleaner than it had ever been. Is it over? David asked. For real this time? I think so. Yeah. Adrian saved his work and backed it up to 3 different secure locations. But we need to tell the board. They need to know how deep this went, how long we've been compromised. That's going to make Vanessa look even worse. Or it's going to prove she was fighting an invisible enemy the whole time. Adrian stood up and stretched muscles that were screaming from hours of hunching over a keyboard. Where's Richard right now? I think he's still in the building. Someone said they saw him in his office an hour ago. Adrian made a decision that was probably stupid, but felt necessary. He took the elevator to the executive floor, walked past the receptionist who'd already gone home, and knocked on Richard Holbrook's door. Come in. Richard was sitting behind a desk that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of mahogany, reading something on his tablet. He glanced up when Adrian entered, and his expression shifted from neutral to annoyed. Mr. Hayes, to what do I owe the pleasure? I know what you did. Richard set down the tablet. You'll need to be more specific. I do a lot of things. You hired the hackers. You planted the back doors. You orchestrated every attack because you needed Vanessa to fail so you could take control of the company. That's quite an accusation. It's not an accusation, it's a fact, and I can prove it. Adrian pulled out his phone and brought up the logs he'd been analyzing. The malicious code in our system has markers embedded in it. Digital fingerprints that trace back to a security consulting firm called Vigilant Systems. The same firm you hired 6 months ago to audit our network security. Richard's expression didn't change. Vigilant Systems is a reputable firm. If they found vulnerabilities and someone exploited them, that's not my responsibility. Except the vulnerabilities didn't exist until after they audited us. They created them. And the code they planted has timestamps that align perfectly with your meetings with potential buyers. You weren't trying to steal data. You were trying to tank the company's value so you could buy it for pennies and rebuild it under your control. You have a very active imagination. I have server logs and financial records and a timeline that puts you at the center of everything. Adrian stepped closer. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Because I'm walking out of here and going straight to the board with this evidence. And when I do, you're done. Not just done at this company, done everywhere. You'll be lucky if you don't end up in federal prison. Richard was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled. It was the kind of smile a shark might give right before it bit you. You're very confident for someone in your position. What position is that? The position of a junior analyst who's been sleeping with his boss and covering for her failures. Do you really think the board is going to believe your story over mine? I'm a respected businessman with 30 years of experience. You're a divorced father who couldn't make his marriage work and is apparently trying to compensate by playing hero. Richard stood up. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to take your little conspiracy theory and keep it to yourself. And in return, I'm going to make sure you keep your job when I take over this company. Because believe me, Adrian, I am taking over. Vanessa's already given up. The board's already turned. It's only a matter of time. She didn't give up. She walked out because she refused to throw me under the bus. Which proves my point. She chose her feelings over sound business judgment. That's not leadership. That's weakness. Adrian felt something hot and sharp rising in his chest. You have no idea what leadership looks like. You've spent 6 months sabotaging a company that 3,000 people depend on just so you could prove you're smarter than a woman half your age. That's not leadership. That's just pathetic. Richard's smile disappeared. Get out of my office. Gladly. Adrian turned to leave, then stopped. One more thing. That evidence I mentioned? I've already sent it to Vanessa, and to a lawyer friend who'll release it publicly if anything happens to me or to her. So whatever you're planning, you might want to reconsider. He walked out before Richard could respond. His hands were shaking, his heart was hammering, but he'd done it. He'd looked Richard Holbrook in the eye and called his bluff. Now, he just had to hope it worked. Adrian left the building and started walking. He didn't have a destination, just needed to move, to think, to process everything that had happened in the last 12 hours. His phone buzzed. Finally, a text from Vanessa. I'm at the pier, Navy Pier, if you want to talk. Adrian changed direction and headed east toward the lake. He found her sitting on a bench near the end of the pier, staring out at black water that merged with black sky. She'd changed out of her business clothes into jeans and a sweater that looked old and comfortable. Her hair was down. She looked younger like this, more like the person she might have been if she hadn't spent 6 years trying to prove herself. Hey, Adrian said. Hey. She didn't look at him. Did you get my letter? Yeah. And? Adrian sat down next to her. And I think you're wrong. You didn't choose me over the company. You chose what was right over what was easy. There's a difference. Richard doesn't see it that way. The board doesn't see it that way. Richard's a criminal and the board's scared. That doesn't make them right. Vanessa finally looked at him. What are you talking about? Adrian told her everything. The dormant code, the 6-month timeline, the connection to vigilant systems and Richard's meetings with buyers. Vanessa listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from tired to alert to furious. You can prove all of this? She asked when he finished. Every bit of it. I've got server logs, financial records, email timestamps, everything we need to prove Richard orchestrated the attacks. Why didn't you lead with that instead of letting me sit here feeling sorry for myself? Because I wanted to make sure you were okay first. Vanessa laughed. It sounded slightly unhinged. I'm not okay. I'm furious. I'm exhausted. I'm sitting on a pier at 1 a.m. because I couldn't stand being in my apartment anymore. But I'm also... She stopped. I'm also relieved because for the first time in weeks, I know exactly what I need to do. Which is? Destroy Richard Holbrook. She stood up. Come on, we've got work to do. They went back to Adrian's apartment because it was closer and because Vanessa said she couldn't think straight in her own space. Adrian made coffee while Vanessa commandeered his laptop and started pulling together all the evidence he'd collected. This is good, she said, scrolling through server logs. This is really good, but we need more than technical evidence. We need something the board can't ignore. Like what? like proof of intent. Richard's too smart to leave a paper trail connecting him directly to the attacks, but he had to communicate with someone. He had to give orders. There's got to be something. They worked through the night. Adrian pulled up emails. Vanessa cross-referenced them with board meeting minutes and financial transactions. They built a timeline that showed not just what Richard had done, but why he'd done it and how much he'd stood to gain. By sunrise, they had a case. Not a perfect case. There were still gaps, still places where Richard could claim plausible deniability. But it was enough. Enough to raise serious questions, enough to force the board to investigate properly instead of just taking Richard's word. "We should present this at the next board meeting," Vanessa said. "Force them to deal with it." "When's the next meeting?" Richard scheduled one for this afternoon, emergency session to discuss leadership transition. She smiled grimly. "Guess it's going to be more interesting than he planned." Adrian poured more coffee. His eyes felt like sandpaper. His brain felt like it was running on fumes. But he was wired, energized by the hunt. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Sure." "Why'd you go to the pier last night? Of all the places in Chicago, why there?" Vanessa was quiet for a moment. "Because that's where my dad proposed to my mom. He told me the story once when I was little, how he'd planned this elaborate dinner at a fancy restaurant, but she said she'd rather get hot dogs and walk by the lake. So that's what they did. And halfway down the pier, he just asked her. No ring, no getting down on one knee, just, 'Will you marry me?' And she said yes. That's a good story." "It is. My dad died when I was 16, heart attack at his desk. He worked himself to death building this company, and I've been so scared of losing what he built that I've been doing the exact same thing, working 80-hour weeks, skipping meals, forgetting what it feels like to just exist without an agenda." She looked at Adrian. "Last night, sitting on that bench, I realized I don't want to die at my desk. I don't want to look back at my life and realize I spent it in conference rooms fighting people who don't matter. I want more than that." "What do you want?" "I want what my parents had. Someone to get hot dogs with. Someone who doesn't care about the empire, just the person running it." She smiled. "I want you, Adrian, even if this whole thing falls apart, even if we lose the company. I want you." Adrian set down his coffee cup and kissed her. It was slow and soft and tasted like exhaustion and hope in equal measure. When they pulled apart, Vanessa was smiling. "Was that okay?" Adrian asked. "It was perfect, but we should probably stop before we get distracted. We've got a board meeting in—" She checked her phone. 6 hours, and I'd like to shower and look like a functioning adult before I walk in there." "You can shower here if you want. I'll make breakfast." "You're going to make me breakfast?" "I'm going to attempt to make breakfast. The success of that attempt is not guaranteed." Vanessa laughed. Then she kissed him again, harder this time, and Adrian thought that maybe this was what his father had meant when he told Adrian as a teenager that the right person makes everything else feel less important. They ate scrambled eggs that were slightly burnt and toast that was slightly cold. Then Vanessa borrowed one of Adrian's shirts, and they both tried to look presentable with zero sleep and way too much coffee in their systems. At 1:30, they walked into Sinclair Technologies together. The receptionist's eyes went wide. People stared as they crossed the lobby. Marcus appeared from nowhere and grabbed Adrian's arm. "Dude, what are you doing?" "Going to a board meeting." "You can't just go to a board meeting." "Watch me." They took the elevator to the executive floor. Vanessa walked like she owned the building, which, technically, she still did. Adrian followed half a step behind, carrying his laptop with all their evidence loaded and ready. The conference room was already full. Richard sat at the head of the table looking smug. The rest of the board looked uncomfortable. When Vanessa walked in with Adrian, the discomfort turned to confusion. "Vanessa," Richard said, "I wasn't expecting you." "I'm sure you weren't." She took her seat at the table. "Adrian, please pull up the files." Adrian connected his laptop to the display screen. Richard's expression shifted from smug to wary. "What is this?" one of the board members asked. "This," Vanessa said, "is proof that every cyber attack we've experienced in the last 2 months was orchestrated by someone sitting at this table." The room exploded into noise. Richard tried to interrupt. Other board members demanded explanations. Vanessa waited until they quieted down, then nodded at Adrian. He walked them through it. the timeline, the code signatures, the connection to vigilant systems. The financial transactions that showed Richard paying the consulting firm 3 times their normal rate for an audit that conveniently created the vulnerabilities the attackers exploited. By the time Adrian finished, Richard looked like he was calculating his options. The rest of the board looked like they wanted to be anywhere else. "This is circumstantial at best," Richard said. "You're connecting dots that don't exist." "Then explain the payment records," Vanessa said. "Explain why you hired a security firm and then met with potential buyers right after they finished their audit. Explain why the attack started exactly 2 weeks after those meetings." "I don't have to explain anything to you." "Actually, you do. Because this board has a fiduciary responsibility to investigate any evidence of wrongdoing, and what we've presented is more than enough evidence to warrant a full investigation, with law enforcement involvement." The older woman who'd spoken up in the previous meeting cleared her throat. "Richard, I think you should step outside while we discuss this. This is absurd. I'm being accused of a crime based on a conspiracy theory from an analyst who's sleeping with the CEO, and you're taking it seriously?" "We're taking it seriously because the evidence is serious. Please, step outside." Richard looked like he wanted to argue. Then he stood up, straightened his jacket, and walked out of the conference room without another word. The door closed. The board members looked at each other. Then the older woman turned to Vanessa. "This is bad." "I know. If even half of what you've presented is accurate, we've got a board member who actively sabotaged the company. The press will have a field day. Our stock price will tank. Clients will panic. Or," Vanessa said, "we get ahead of it. We announce that we've discovered evidence of corporate espionage, that we're cooperating fully with law enforcement, and that we've already implemented new security measures to prevent it from happening again. We turn it into a story about a company that caught a threat and dealt with it instead of a company that was victimized." That's a significant spin. It's also true. Adrian caught this. He stopped the attacks. He protected our clients. That's the narrative we should be telling. The board members talked among themselves for several minutes. Adrian stood against the wall, trying to look professional and not like someone who'd been awake for 36 hours straight. Finally, the older woman spoke. "We're going to launch a formal investigation. Richard will be suspended from all board activities pending the results. Vanessa, you'll remain as CEO. And Mr. Hayes," she looked at Adrian, "you're going to be promoted to Director of Cybersecurity, effective immediately." Adrian blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "You've proven yourself capable under extraordinary circumstances. This company needs people like you in leadership positions. Do you accept?" Yes, I accept." "Good. Now both of you go home and get some sleep. You look terrible." They left the conference room in a daze, walked through the office while people pretended not to stare, got in the elevator and watched the numbers descend. "Did that actually just happen?" Adrian asked. "I think so. Yeah." Vanessa leaned against the elevator wall. "You're the Director of Cybersecurity now. I'm the Director of Cybersecurity now. How does that feel?" "Terrifying. Also kind of amazing." He looked at her. "Does this mean we don't work together anymore, since we're both directors?" "We work in different divisions, different reporting structures. No conflict of interest." She smiled. "We can have dinner whenever we want, and nobody can say it's inappropriate." "Just dinner?" "Well, dinner, and whatever comes after dinner." The elevator doors opened. They walked out into the October afternoon, and Adrian felt something shift in his chest. Relief, maybe, or hope, or just the simple recognition that sometimes things actually worked out the way they were supposed to. "Come on," Vanessa said, taking his hand. "Let's go get those hot dogs." They walked toward the lake together, two people who'd found each other in chaos and somehow managed to build something real from it. Behind them, Sinclair Technologies kept running. Ahead of them, the future was uncertain, but suddenly felt possible. And for the first time in months, that was enough. The hot dogs were overpriced and underwhelming, but they ate them anyway while sitting on the same bench where Vanessa's father had proposed to her mother 30 years ago. The October wind coming off the lake was cold enough that Adrian could see his breath, and Vanessa kept stealing his fries because she'd claimed she wasn't hungry and then immediately regretted that decision. "This is nice," she said. Mediocre hot dogs in freezing weather? Being here. With you. Not thinking about board meetings or security breaches or Richard's face when we presented that evidence. She leaned against his shoulder. Just existing. Adrian wrapped an arm around her. We should do this more often. What, eat terrible food by the lake? Yeah, exactly that. They sat there until the sun started to set, and Vanessa's phone began buzzing with messages she ignored. Adrian's phone was equally insistent, but he'd learned in the last few months that not everything required an immediate response. Some things could wait. Some moments deserved to be protected from the constant demands of a world that always wanted more. I should probably go home, Vanessa said eventually. Sleep for 12 hours. Wake up and figure out what being CEO actually means now that I'm not constantly fighting fires. You could come to my place. It's closer. Your place has one bathroom and questionable water pressure. But it also has me. That's got to count for something. Vanessa laughed. It counts for a lot, actually. She stood up and pulled him to his feet. But I really do need to sleep in my own bed tonight. Process everything that happened. Figure out what comes next. What does come next? For the company? Complete security overhaul, full audit of everyone who had access to our systems. Probably some very uncomfortable conversations with clients about how long we were compromised. She started walking back toward the city. For us? I have no idea. This is the part where I usually panic and self-sabotage because things are going well, and I don't trust that. Are you going to do that? Probably a little bit, but I'm going to try not to. She squeezed his hand. You make me want to try. They parted ways at the train station with a kiss that lasted long enough that someone walking past told them to get a room. Adrian rode home feeling lighter than he had in months, maybe years. His phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. Dude, you just became a director and took down a corrupt board member in the same day. You're a legend. Also, everyone's talking about you and Vanessa, just FYI. Adrian typed back. Let them talk. That's very zen of you. I'm too tired to care what people think. Fair. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be crazy. Marcus was right. Tomorrow was going to be crazy. But tonight, Adrian was going to go home, check on Mia via text, and sleep for the first time in days without feeling like disaster was waiting around the corner. He made it 3 steps into his apartment before his phone rang. Chloe. Hey, is everything okay with Mia? Mia's fine. She's at a sleepover. I'm calling because Brett and I saw something on social media about Sinclair Technologies and a board scandal, and your name was mentioned in the comments. What's going on? Adrian sank onto his couch. It's complicated. Is it the same complicated that's had you working crazy hours and missing time with Mia? Yeah, but it's resolved now, or mostly resolved. I can't really talk about the details. Adrian? Chloe's voice had that edge it got when she was trying very hard to be patient. I need to know if this is going to affect you. If you're going to lose your job or get caught up in some legal thing that makes it harder for you to see Mia. I'm not losing my job. The opposite, actually. I just got promoted to director. Silence on the other end. Then, director? As in senior leadership? As in director of cybersecurity. It happened today. I'm still processing it. Wow, congratulations. That's actually really great. Another pause. Is this why you've been weird lately, the promotion? Part of it. The other part is I've been seeing someone. Seeing someone as in dating. Yeah. Who? Adrian took a breath. The CEO of my company. Chloe was quiet for so long Adrian thought she'd hung up. Then, you're dating your boss. I'm dating someone who happens to be the CEO. We work in different divisions now, so technically she's not my boss anymore. Adrian, what the hell are you thinking? I'm thinking I met someone who makes me happy. Someone who sees me as more than just adequate or boring or whatever you used to call me when you were explaining why our marriage wasn't working. That's not fair. Maybe not, but it's true. Adrian rubbed his face. Look, I didn't call to fight. You asked what was going on, and I told you, Mia's my priority. She always has been. But I'm also allowed to have a life that doesn't revolve entirely around proving I'm a good father. Chloe sighed. You're right. I'm sorry. I worry. About you. About whether you're making decisions because they're good for you or because you're trying to prove something. A little bit of both, probably, but mostly the first thing. Okay, well, I hope it works out, the job and the relationship. She sounded like she meant it. And Adrian, I'm glad you're happy. You deserve that. They hung up, and Adrian sat in his dark apartment thinking about how strange it was that the person who'd once made him feel small was now the one saying he deserved happiness. People changed. Circumstances changed. Sometimes the narratives we told ourselves about who we were and what we deserved changed too. His phone buzzed again. Vanessa. Made it home. My apartment still feels wrong, but slightly less wrong than usual. Progress. That's definitely progress. What are you going to do now? Probably order Thai food and watch something mindless until I fall asleep. You? Same, but with leftover pizza and a documentary about cybercrime that I've been meaning to watch for months. You're such a nerd. You're dating a nerd. What does that say about you? That I have excellent taste. Adrian smiled at his phone like an idiot. Then he ordered pizza, queued up the documentary, and tried to remember the last time his life had felt this close to normal. The next 6 months were a blur of reconstruction and adaptation. The FBI opened a formal investigation into Richard Holbrook and Vigilant Systems. Richard resigned from the board before he could be removed, released a statement about pursuing other opportunities, and disappeared from public view. Rumor was he'd moved to Europe to avoid the fallout. Adrian didn't care where he went as long as he stayed gone. Sinclair Technologies weathered the scandal better than anyone expected. Vanessa held a press conference where she laid out exactly what had happened, what they'd done to fix it, and what safeguards they'd implemented to prevent it from happening again. She was calm, direct, and completely transparent. The press ate it up. Clients stayed. Investors calmed down. The company's stock price recovered within 3 months. Adrian's promotion came with a salary increase that meant he could finally afford a bigger apartment and take Mia on a real vacation instead of just weekend trips to museums. He hired a team of analysts who actually knew what they were doing, implemented the security protocols he'd been designing in his head for years, and slowly transformed the cybersecurity department from reactive to proactive. He and Vanessa dated the way normal people dated, which felt revolutionary after everything they'd been through. Dinner twice a week. Movies on weekends when neither of them was working late. Quiet evenings at one apartment or the other where they cooked together and argued about whose turn it was to pick what to watch. They fought sometimes. Vanessa had a tendency to treat relationship problems like business problems that could be solved through strategic planning. Adrian had a tendency to shut down when things got uncomfortable instead of talking through them. They were both works in progress, learning how to be with another person after spending years convinced they were better off alone. The office gossip never completely died, but it faded from scandal to just another part of the company's ecosystem. The CEO was dating the director of cybersecurity. So what? They were professionals who kept their personal and work lives separate, mostly separate. Separate enough. Mia met Vanessa 4 months in, at a weekend brunch that Adrian had been dreading for weeks. He'd built it up in his head as this massive event where everything could go wrong. Instead, Mia had walked in, looked at Vanessa, and said, "You're really pretty. Do you like penguins?" Vanessa, to her credit, had said yes without hesitation, and the two of them had spent the next hour talking about penguins and ice cream and whether mermaids were real. By the end of brunch, Mia had declared Vanessa cool, which in 6-year-old terms was the highest possible praise. "That went well," Adrian said afterward, watching Mia run ahead of them on the sidewalk. "She's great. You did good. We did good. Me and Chloe. Even if the marriage didn't work, we made a pretty incredible kid." Vanessa took his hand. "You know what I realized today?" "What?" "I spent 6 years building a company because I thought that's what success looked like. And it is. But this," she gestured to Mia, to the sunny Saturday afternoon, to the life they were building together. "This is what actually matters. The rest is just what we do to pay for it." Adrian kissed her right there on the sidewalk, while Mia made exaggerated gagging noises, and passers-by smiled at them like they were characters in a movie about people who figured things out. Time moved forward the way time does. Spring turned to summer, turned to fall again. Adrian's apartment lease ended, and he moved into a 2-bedroom in a better neighborhood. Vanessa redecorated her penthouse with furniture that actually reflected her personality instead of what she thought a CEO's home should look like. They talked about moving in together, decided it was too soon, then talked about it again 3 months later and decided maybe it wasn't. The company thrived. Adrian's team stopped 3 separate breach attempts in the first year, each one less sophisticated than the last, as word spread that Sinclair Technologies was no longer an easy target. Vanessa launched 2 new product lines, acquired a smaller competitor, and got profiled in 3 different business magazines that all asked about her relationship status and seemed disappointed when she refused to make it a story. "They want me to be the CEO who proves you can have it all," she told Adrian after one particularly annoying interview. "Like my relationship status is somehow relevant to my ability to run a company." "What did you tell them?" "I told them my personal life was personal and my professional life was professional, and the 2 things didn't need to intersect in their article." She flopped onto Adrian's couch. "One of them asked if I was worried about setting a bad example by dating someone who works for me." "What did you say?" "I said he doesn't work for me. We're in different divisions. And even if we weren't, 2 adults choosing to date each other isn't a scandal, it's just life." She looked at him. "Was that okay? I know we've been keeping things relatively low-key." It was perfect. "I'm tired of acting like we're doing something wrong." "Me too." They were quiet for a moment. Outside, someone was playing music too loud. A dog barked. Chicago did its Chicago thing. "I have something to tell you," Adrian said. Vanessa sat up. "That sounds ominous." "It's not ominous, it's just Chloe's getting married to Brett. She told me last week." "How do you feel about that?" "Honestly, relieved. It means she's moved on. It means Mia gets to see what a healthy relationship looks like instead of watching her parents pretend they still liked each other. And it means I can stop feeling guilty about the divorce because clearly Chloe's fine." "Were you feeling guilty?" "A little. Yeah, I spent 2 years thinking I'd failed at something fundamental, that I'd broken this promise I'd made and hurt people I loved in the process. But I think I'm starting to understand that sometimes things end because they're supposed to. Not because anyone failed, just because it wasn't right." Vanessa moved closer. "Is this right? Us?" "Yeah, I think it is. Even when I'm impossible to deal with and you're too stubborn to admit when something's bothering you? Especially then." She kissed him, and Adrian thought about how different this felt from his marriage. How with Chloe everything had always felt like work, like he was constantly trying to be enough and constantly falling short. With Vanessa it felt like partnership, like they were both imperfect people who decided their imperfections fit together in a way that worked. 1 year after they'd met in the cafe, Adrian started planning. He wasn't naturally romantic. His idea of a nice gesture was usually just remembering to buy flowers on occasion and not burning dinner. But this felt important. This felt like something that deserved more than his usual half-effort. He recruited Marcus to help, which turned out to be a mistake because Marcus's ideas were all terrible and involved flash mobs or hiring a skywriter or other grand gestures that would make Vanessa uncomfortable. In the end, Adrian went with something simpler, something that meant something. He made reservations at a restaurant on the top floor of a building in River North. Not fancy in a stuffy way, but nice enough that it felt special. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Good food. The kind of place where you could have a conversation without shouting over music. He told Vanessa they were celebrating her 1-year anniversary as CEO post-scandal. She believed him because it was technically true, and also because Vanessa was good at reading people, but terrible at reading him specifically when he was trying to be sneaky. The night of the dinner, Adrian picked Vanessa up from her apartment. She wore a dark blue dress that made her eyes look more blue than gray, and her hair was down the way he liked it. They took a cab to the restaurant, rode the elevator to the top floor, and got seated at a table by the windows just as the sun was starting to set. "This is nice," Vanessa said, looking out at the city. "You didn't have to do this." "I wanted to." They ordered wine that was actually good this time, and appetizers neither of them really wanted because they were both too nervous to eat. Adrian kept touching the ring box in his jacket pocket, making sure it was still there, and Vanessa kept giving him odd looks like she knew something was up, but couldn't figure out what. Halfway through dinner, she set down her fork. "Okay, what's going on?" "What do you mean?" "You've been weird all night. Fidgety. You keep checking your pocket like you're afraid you lost your phone." And you picked a restaurant with a view, which you never do because you think they're overpriced tourist traps. She leaned forward. So what's happening? Did something go wrong at work? Is there another attack? Are you breaking up with me? I'm not breaking up with you. Then what? Adrian took a breath. This was not how he'd planned to do this. He'd planned to wait until after dessert, until the moment was perfect. But Vanessa was looking at him with those gray-blue eyes, and he realized the moment was never going to be perfect because perfect wasn't real. I'm going to ask you something, he said. And before I do, I need you to know that you can say no. You can say not yet. You can say you need time to think. Whatever you say, it's okay. Vanessa's expression shifted from confused to understanding. Adrian, let me finish. He pulled the ring box from his pocket and set it on the table between them. Didn't open it yet. Just let it sit there. A year ago, I was sitting in a cafe trying to decide if I cared enough about anything to finish the work I was doing. And then you walked in, and some guy told you that powerful women like you were destined to end up alone. And I thought, no, that's bullshit. That's the kind of thing people say when they're scared of someone who doesn't need them. I remember. You asked me once why I chose this, why I chose you, even though it was complicated and messy and probably professional suicide. And I told you it was because you made me want to stop being afraid of wanting things. Adrian opened the box. The ring inside was simple. Silver band, small diamond, nothing ostentatious. I still want things, Vanessa. I want to wake up next to you when you're grumpy because your coffee isn't hot enough. I want to fight with you about whose turn it is to do dishes. I want to watch you be brilliant at work and come home and be normal with me. I want to build a life that's messy and imperfect and completely ours. Vanessa's eyes were bright. She didn't say anything. So I'm asking, will you marry me? The restaurant had gone quiet around them. Not actually quiet. People were still talking, silverware was still clinking, but it felt quiet because in that moment, Adrian's entire world had narrowed to the woman across from him and whatever she was about to say. Vanessa looked at the ring, then at him. Then she started laughing. Adrian's stomach dropped. Is that a no? No, yes. She wiped her eyes. I was going to ask you. Tonight, I have a whole speech planned, and everything. I was going to do it after dessert. Adrian stared at her. You were going to propose to me? I've had the ring for 2 weeks. It's in my purse right now. She pulled out a small velvet box and set it next to his on the table. I was so nervous I almost canceled 3 times today. They looked at each other across the table with 2 ring boxes between them, and then they were both laughing. Full, genuine laughter that made the people at nearby tables smile, even though they had no idea what was happening. So is that a yes? Adrian asked when he could breathe again. Yes, obviously yes. Vanessa picked up his ring box and opened it properly. It's perfect. How did you know my size? I asked your assistant. She was thrilled to be part of a conspiracy. I asked Marcus. He gave me your size and then made me promise to invite him to the wedding. We're both terrible at keeping secrets. The worst. Adrian took the ring from the box and slid it onto Vanessa's finger. It fit perfectly. Then Vanessa opened her box, a platinum band with a subtle design that looked like circuit board traces, and put it on Adrian's finger. Also a perfect fit. We're engaged, Vanessa said, like she was testing out how the words sounded. We're engaged, Adrian confirmed. What do we do now? I think we're supposed to kiss. Right, that makes sense. They leaned across the table and kissed while the restaurant staff pretended not to notice, and other diners definitely noticed, and someone's phone camera definitely captured the moment for social media. When they pulled apart, Vanessa was smiling wider than Adrian had ever seen. This is crazy, she said. Good crazy or bad crazy? The best kind of crazy. They finished dinner in a happy daze, barely tasting the food, too busy planning and laughing and occasionally just staring at the rings on their fingers like they couldn't quite believe they were real. When the check came, they fought over who got to pay until the waiter suggested they split it, which felt appropriately symbolic. Outside, the city was alive with Friday night energy. They walked without destination, just moving through streets that suddenly felt different than they had a few hours ago. Everything looked the same, but wasn't. The world had shifted in some fundamental way. We should tell people, Vanessa said. Mia first, then our families, then work. Work's going to be weird. Work is always weird. This just gives them something new to talk about. She squeezed his hand. Are you worried about it? The optics? No, I stopped worrying about optics around month 3. Now I just care about whether we're happy. Are you happy? Adrian stopped walking and turned to face her. They were standing in front of a closed bookstore, the window display full of novels he'd never read. Somewhere nearby, someone was playing saxophone badly. A bus drove past, too loud, too bright. I'm happier than I thought I was allowed to be, Adrian said. For years, I thought happiness was something other people got. People who were more interesting or more ambitious or less fundamentally boring than me. And then I met you and realized I wasn't boring. I was just with someone who made me feel boring. Chloe really did a number on you. She did, but I let her. I believed the story she was telling about who I was instead of figuring out who I actually was. He touched Vanessa's face. You helped me figure that out. You saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. And I know that sounds like a line from a bad movie, but it's true. You changed my life. You changed mine too. Before you, I thought successful meant being untouchable, unbreakable. I thought if I admitted I was lonely or scared or anything other than perfectly confident, people would see it as weakness. But you... Her voice cracked slightly. You saw me at my worst and didn't run away. You stuck around when it was messy and complicated and definitely not worth the trouble. And you made me believe that maybe I deserved that. You deserve everything. So do you. They stood there on the Chicago sidewalk, two people who'd found each other in a cafe and somehow built something neither of them had thought was possible. Around them, the city kept moving, people heading to bars, couples arguing, teenagers laughing too loud, all the small human dramas playing out simultaneously. And in the middle of it all, Adrian and Vanessa were just two more people trying to figure out how to love each other without destroying what they'd built. We should go, Vanessa said finally. It's getting late. Your place or mine? Ours. Let's start calling it ours. They went back to Vanessa's apartment because it was bigger and because sometime in the last year it had stopped feeling wrong and started feeling like home. They ordered champagne from a delivery service that charged too much, drank it straight from the bottle, and stayed up until 3 in the morning making plans that were probably too ambitious and definitely too optimistic. The wedding happened 6 months later in the same park where Vanessa's parents had gotten married 40 years earlier. Small ceremony. Just family and close friends. Marcus was Adrian's best man and gave a speech that was equal parts touching and embarrassing. Vanessa's assistant was maid of honor and cried through the entire ceremony. Mia was flower girl and took the job so seriously that she handed out flowers to every guest individually and held up the processional by 10 minutes. Chloe came with Brett, which Adrian appreciated even though it felt strange watching his ex-wife at his wedding. But she seemed genuinely happy for him, and Brett turned out to be less of a try-hard than Adrian had thought. Just a guy who loved Chloe and treated Mia well. That was enough. The ceremony was short. Neither Adrian nor Vanessa wanted anything elaborate, just vows they'd written themselves and a kiss and the legal paperwork that made it official. When the officiant pronounced them married, everyone cheered and Mia threw flower petals that she'd been hoarding specifically for this moment. At the reception, Vanessa gave a toast that made half the room cry. She talked about her father and the company he'd built and how she'd spent years trying to prove she was worthy of that legacy. And then she talked about meeting Adrian and realizing that worthiness wasn't something you earned through achievements. It was something you accepted by letting people see you as you actually were. I thought powerful women ended up alone, she said, looking at Adrian. Someone told me that once, and I believed it for a long time. But I was wrong. Powerful women don't end up alone. Women who are afraid to be vulnerable end up alone. And I'm not afraid anymore. Adrian's toast was shorter and less eloquent. He talked about penguins, how the one Mia had pointed out at the aquarium had been standing alone, because that's what he'd thought he was supposed to do. Stand alone. Be independent, not need anyone. But penguins were actually social animals who survived by huddling together. And maybe humans were the same way. I spent years standing alone because I thought that's what made me strong, he said. But real strength is admitting you don't want to be alone. Real strength is building something with another person, even when it's scary and uncertain and definitely not guaranteed to work out. So thank you, Vanessa, for making me brave enough to huddle. People laughed. Someone shouted that it was the worst metaphor they'd ever heard. Adrian didn't care. He'd said what he meant, and Vanessa was smiling at him like he'd just recited poetry. They danced badly to music they'd picked themselves, cut a cake that was slightly lopsided because Vanessa's cousin had made it and wasn't actually a professional baker, took photos that would look dated in 10 years but perfect in the moment, did all the traditional wedding things because traditions existed for a reason, even if that reason was just giving people something to do with their hands during emotionally overwhelming events. At the end of the night, when the guests had mostly left and the venue staff was starting to clean up, Adrian and Vanessa sat on a bench at the edge of the park and watched the last of the sunset fade. "We did it," Vanessa said. "We really did." "How do you feel?" "Exhausted, happy, slightly drunk from champagne I didn't actually drink that much of." Adrian leaned his head back. "Grateful. I feel grateful." "Me too." Vanessa kicked off her heels. "You know what's funny? A year and a half ago, I was sitting in a cafe convinced that my life was exactly what it was supposed to be. That success meant being alone at the top. That relationships were distractions from the real work of building something that mattered. And I was so wrong, it's almost embarrassing." "You weren't wrong. You were just answering the wrong question." "What do you mean?" "You were asking, what does success look like? When you should have been asking, what does a life look like?" Adrian took her hand. "Success is important. Building things is important. But it's not a substitute for actually living. And I think you knew that. I think that's why you were in that cafe looking so miserable. Because some part of you understood that winning at work wasn't the same as winning at life." Vanessa was quiet for a moment. "You're smarter than you give yourself credit for." "I'm really not. I'm just good at noticing when other people are making the same mistakes I made." "What mistakes did you make?" "I let someone tell me I wasn't enough. And then I spent years believing it instead of questioning it. I thought if I just worked harder, if I was just more present, if I was just better at being what Chloe wanted, then maybe she'd love me the way I needed to be loved. But you can't earn love like that. You can't optimize your way into being loved. You just have to find someone who loves you as you are, and then you build from there." "Is that what we're doing? Building?" "Yeah, I think so." Adrian stood up and pulled her to her feet. "Come on, Mrs. Hayes, let's go start our life." "I'm keeping Sinclair professionally." "I know. I was being poetic." "It was very poetic. I'm impressed." They walked back to the car that would take them to the hotel where they'd spend one night before real life resumed. Behind them, the park was empty except for a few stragglers and the venue staff packing up chairs. In front of them, the city stretched out in all its messy, complicated glory. The thing about life, Adrian thought, is that it never actually resolves the way stories do. There's no clean ending, no moment where everything comes together perfectly and you get to roll credits. Richard Holbrook was still out there somewhere, probably planning his comeback. The company would face new threats, new challenges, new board members who thought they knew better. Adrian and Vanessa would fight and make up and fight again, because that's what real relationships did. But they'd fight together. They'd face whatever came next as partners instead of individuals trying to prove they didn't need anyone. And maybe that was the whole point. Maybe the lesson wasn't that love conquered all, or that the right person fixed everything. Maybe the lesson was just that life was better when you stopped pretending you were supposed to face it alone. A year later, Vanessa would announce she was stepping down as CEO to launch her own consulting firm. Adrian would go with her, leaving his director position to start something new. They'd hire a small team of people who believed in what they were building. They'd struggle for the first 6 months, nearly go bankrupt twice, and eventually find their footing helping other companies build the kind of security infrastructure that could have prevented what happened to Sinclair Technologies. 2 years later, Mia would tell Adrian she wanted a little brother or sister. Vanessa would panic at the idea of pregnancy and work deadlines and everything that came with expanding their family. They'd have long conversations about whether they were ready, whether it was fair to bring a child into their chaotic life, whether they were being selfish for waiting or selfish for considering it at all. In the end, they'd decide to try, and 9 months after that decision, They'd welcome a daughter who looked exactly like Vanessa and acted exactly like Adrian. 5 years later, they'd move into a house in a suburb they'd once sworn they'd never live in, with a yard and a mortgage and all the trappings of conventional life they'd both resisted. And it would feel right in a way neither of them expected. Not because suburban life was inherently better, but because they'd chosen it together. Because sometimes the rebellious choice was actually the conventional one when it meant prioritizing the family you'd built over the image you'd been maintaining. But all of that was in the future. Right now, on this night, they were just two people who'd gotten married and were trying to figure out what came next. And what came next was simple. They'd go back to their hotel. They'd change out of their wedding clothes. They'd probably order room service even though they weren't hungry because that's what you did on your wedding night. And they'd fall asleep tangled up in each other. Two imperfect people who'd decided their particular brands of imperfection fit together well enough to build a life on. In the end, maybe that was the real story. Not that love was easy or that finding the right person solved everything, but that sometimes, if you were lucky enough to find someone who saw you clearly and loved you anyway, you could build something worth having, something messy and complicated, and completely yours. The billionaire who'd thought powerful women were destined to be alone had been wrong. And the single father who thought he was too boring to deserve real love had been wrong too. They'd both been carrying stories about themselves that weren't actually true. And by finding each other, they'd written a new story. One that didn't promise happily ever after, but promised something better. A partner for the complicated, imperfect, absolutely worthwhile journey of figuring out how to live. That was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything.